Tonight, we wander through the stone-cold corridors of medieval castles to find out how anyone managed to sleep, dream, or even survive the night without turning into an icicle. You open your eyes to darkness, not the friendly kind of darkness that hums softly behind the eyelids, but a dense, velvet gloom that feels like it's pressing down on the air. Somewhere above, the faint sound of a flag whipping in the wind, the muffled call of a night watchman, and the low groan of timbers expand and contract in the cold. You are inside a medieval castle, which means that yes, it's technically a home, but more accurately, it's a drafty stone refrigerator pretending to be one. A small fire hisses in the corner, valiantly trying to warm the air, but its glow reaches no further than your boots. The stone walls absorb heat the way a miser hoards coins, reluctantly, and with the intent to give nothing back. You pull your woolen blanket tighter around you. It's itchy, heavy, and smells faintly of sheep and smoke, comforting in a rustic, survivalist kind of way. Someone once said castles were romantic. That person probably never tried sleeping in one. The bed beneath you is a marvel of medieval design. A wooden frame creaking under a straw mattress, stuffed not with feathers or soft down, but with a combination of barley stalks, hay, and whatever was handy when winter set in. If you shift too quickly, it sounds like a small bonfire crackling beneath your sheets. And don't even think about rolling too far to the side. The rope lattice supporting the mattress is as forgiving as a tax collector. Still, you're luckier than most. Peasants outside the castle walls are probably huddled together on the floor, wrapped in rough cloaks and animal pelts, forming what was sometimes called a sleeping pile. A cozy concept, though personal space was as rare as central heating. Your chamber is dim, but a faint orange light flickers off the stone, showing a carved chest near the wall, a bundle of rushes on the floor, and a small, warped window with frost spreading across the glass like veins of silver. You can see your breath, pale and ghostly. You breathe again, just to watch it bloom and vanish. This is how most nights went in the castle, long, cold, and echoing. Yet, strangely, it was considered a luxury. You tuck your feet under the blanket and listen to the castle sigh. It's not haunted, well, not officially, but it's always making sounds. Dripping water, shifting wood, the clink of distant chains, the scurrying of mice that think they own the place. Somewhere in the next chamber, a servant stirs the fire for the lord's quarters. His bed, probably surrounded by thick curtains to trap warmth. You imagine him there, wrapped in layers of fur, half asleep beneath a canopy carved with saints and stars, his breath fogging the dark air. And even he, with all his rank and comfort, probably dreams of spring. The truth is, no one escaped the cold in a medieval castle. They simply made peace with it. Wool, fur, layers of linen. These were their allies. Beds were shared. Dogs slept inside, not for love, but for warmth. And even chamber pots were sometimes warmed with hot stones before use. There was a strange intimacy to it all. The chill made people practical, and practicality made them inventive. You shift again. The mattress rustles like dry grass. The air is sharp, smelling faintly of smoke, tallow, and humanity. Somewhere, a rooster mistakes the moon for dawn and crows prematurely. The irony doesn't escape you. Everyone in this castle is awake at odd hours, and yet, they still call this sleep. It's easy to forget how different sleep used to be. You might think of it as one long stretch of unconsciousness, but in the Middle Ages, sleep came in two acts. People called it first sleep and second sleep. You'd drift off after sunset, wake sometime around midnight, then spend an hour or two doing whatever medieval people did when insomnia struck. Some prayed. Some whispered in the dark. Some even visited neighbors. Imagine creeping through cold corridors at 1 a.m., candle in hand, wrapped in fur, to have a casual midnight chat about the harvest. That was normal. So next time you wake up at 3 a.m. and check your phone, remember, you're just continuing a medieval tradition. You pull the blanket tighter. The fire pops. A servant enters quietly, carrying a small earthenware pot. Inside it, heated stones glow faintly. She tucks it near your feet beneath the covers. Warmth spreads slowly, a small miracle against the winter night. You nod to her, grateful, but she says nothing, just bows slightly and vanishes back into the corridor. Historians still debate whether people in castles genuinely slept well. It's difficult to judge by medieval letters, which were mostly written by people too busy surviving to wax poetic about their sleep cycles. But the clues remain, in chamber records, in inventories of wool, fur, and linen, in notes about warming pans and bedfellows. And so, as you settle deeper into the straw, half dreaming, half freezing, you begin to understand. Medieval sleep wasn't about comfort. It was about endurance and the quiet art of making the best of it. You glance once more toward the window, where moonlight filters through frost. Somewhere far below, the drawbridge creaks in the wind. Someone sneezes in the servants' quarters. Someone else snores. You're not sure which sound will carry you off first. The wind, the fire, or your own exhaustion. Still, it's kind of peaceful. So, before you drift off, remember to like this video if your toes aren't already numb, and comment where you're watching from. Is it warm there? Do you have blankets? Lucky you. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. Deeper into the castle, into the chambers where the real warmth, however little, was found. Morning doesn't arrive so much as it limps in. A dull gray light seeps through the narrow window, filtering across the rushes on the floor. The fire has died to ash. Your breath once again drifts in little white clouds. You sit up, joints stiff, back sore from the wooden frame, and realize something that medieval life taught everyone quickly. Getting out of bed is often colder than staying in it. You dress layer by layer: linen shirt, wool tunic, thick hose, cloak. By the time you're done, you feel less like a person and more like a well-wrapped cabbage. Down in the great hall, servants are already at work. You hear the clatter of pails, the low hum of conversation, the scratch of brooms on stone. The hall smells faintly of last night's stew and damp wool. Someone's sweeping the rushes again. Those fragrant herbs and straw scattered across the floor to absorb spills and smells. They're not changed often, so the term fragrant is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. A maid pours hot water into a basin for washing, steam rising like a ghost. She glances at you and says, "Cold morning." You nod. That's the medieval understatement of the century. You glance toward the massive fireplace in the hall, its embers barely alive. A servant crouches, coaxing flame from ash. He's blowing gently, eyes watering from the smoke. In winter, fire was both lifeline and obsession. One historical fact that surprises modern readers: castles weren't built for comfort, they were fortresses first, homes second. They were made to survive sieges, not winter drafts. Insulation wasn't a priority when designing a wall 10 feet thick. So the result? You got safety but also hypothermia. Some lords tried to fix that. Hangings of tapestry or wool were used to line the walls, trapping heat and muffling the sound of wind. They depicted scenes of hunting, saints, or fantastical beasts, because if you're freezing, you might as well have a unicorn to stare at. You wander toward the window, peering through narrow slits meant more for archers than sunlight. Outside, Snow drapes the courtyard like flour dusted over stone. A few bundled figures cross it quickly, heads down. You spot a kitchen boy lugging logs, a hound trotting behind him, its breath steaming in the air. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls, low and slow. Breakfast time. You make your way toward the great table, where bowls of porridge and rough bread await. Everything is lukewarm before it even reaches the mouth. Still, the heat from the first bite spreads faintly through your chest, like sunlight remembered. The strange how sleep and waking blend here. People rose before dawn, often after that second sleep, to work, pray, or simply survive another morning of frost. And somehow they did it with patience. A woman nearby is wrapping her hands in cloth before she churns butter. Keeps the chill out, she mutters. You can't tell if she's talking to herself or you. There's humor in it if you squint. The entire castle exists in a kind of organized suffering. Everyone moving through the cold like it's an old friend they just can't get rid of. Remember the servant who brought you the warming stones last night? You see her again pouring ale for breakfast. Yes, ale for everyone, including children. Water was unsafe, so mild beer was the morning beverage of choice. You take a sip and it's flat but oddly comforting, like a medieval smoothie. Some scholars argue that medieval people didn't feel the cold the way we do, that their bodies were hardened by it, their expectations lower. But no one really knows for sure. Historians still debate whether constant exposure built tolerance or simply made misery feel normal. Either way, life went on. You walk past the fire again, warming your hands, listening to the castle breathe and hum. Every stone has absorbed centuries of footsteps, whispers, and sighs. You can almost hear them if you're quiet enough, the endless rhythm of human endurance echoing softly in the cold. And as you look around, at these walls and these people, you realize they didn't just sleep through winter. They lived through it. Maybe, in a way, they were warmer than we think. The afternoon sun never really shines in a medieval castle. It merely glows weakly, a pale guest who doesn't stay long. By midday, light leaks through arrow-slit windows like golden smoke, settling across the walls where tapestries sway faintly in the draft. The stone seems alive with its own kind of chill. Touch it, and you might swear it's breathing frost. You walk slowly down the corridor, your footsteps softened by rush mats. Every sound echoes: the creak of a wooden beam, the far-off clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the faint laughter of children somewhere in the courtyard. Even the air hums, full of echoes and history. It's here, in this half-lit chill, that sleep is never too far away. Everyone is a little tired. The servants move quietly, eyes heavy from long nights of tending fires. Even the dogs are drowsy, curled near the hearths, twitching in dream. You pass the bedchamber of the Lord and Lady, its door carved with vines and angels. Inside, it's dim but rich. A great bed dominates the room, raised high from the floor like a stage. Curtains of red will hang around it to keep the warmth trapped, though they also keep out the air, making it feel like sleeping inside a velvet coffin. The lady of the castle is seated by the window, sewing by the pale light. Her fingers move deftly, threading gold into the fabric. The rhythm of her hands is steady, almost hypnotic. Behind her, the maid hums a low tune, something about May flowers and the sun that never seems to arrive. You pause, taking in the scene. It's beautiful and faintly sad, the way people here build tiny pockets of comfort inside a world that insists on being cold. The lady looks up and smiles faintly. "Too cold to think today," she says. Her humor is soft, almost invisible, the kind you use when you've accepted that the weather always wins. She points to a small brass pan by the hearth, a warming pan. It's filled with hot coals and slid under the bedclothes before sleep to warm them. You imagine the smell of heated metal and ash, the faint danger of fire next to linen sheets. It's a wonder more castles didn't burn down just trying to stay cozy. And yet this was luxury. Peasants outside the castle didn't have warming pans or fur-lined bedding. They had straw mats, shared bodies, and the occasional pig for heat. 3 pigs to a bed might sound like a joke, but in some cottages it was simply physics. Body heat was the most reliable form of insulation. Meanwhile, here in the castle, sleep was something layered, literally and socially. The lord and lady at the top had fur, wool, privacy. Servants slept in corners, wrapped in their cloaks. Guards napped in the great hall by the fire, one eye open. The line between sleeping and waiting blurred. A historian once wrote that medieval sleep was communal, intermittent, and deeply practical. In other words, people slept wherever and however they could. You leave the ladies' chamber and descend the spiral stairs. Those narrow, twisting tunnels of stone that always make you feel like you're descending into a memory. The air grows colder with every step. At the bottom, you emerge into the undercroft, where barrels and casks line the walls. The air smells of earth and ale, and somewhere in the distance, water drips with maddening rhythm. Here, the servants rest when they can. One leans against a barrel, head nodding, wrapped in a rough cloak. Another sits beside a small brazier, warming her hands, eyes half closed. Their rest is lighter, more fragile, snatches of sleep between labor. You think of how strange it is that a castle, built to be impregnable, is at its most human in these quiet moments of fatigue. And as you stand there, you start to feel sleepy too. Maybe it's the dim light, or the smell of wood smoke, or the soft murmur of the servants' breathing. There's something about medieval silence that feels heavy, like a blanket laid over the senses. You close your eyes for a moment, and it's easy to imagine yourself centuries back. Wrapped in wool, hearing the same wind, dreaming the same small dreams of warmth. When you open your eyes, a cat has appeared on the stone ledge beside you, watching with solemn interest. It blinks slowly, curls its tail, and settles down to nap. Of course it does. Cats have been the same across all of history, indifferent, graceful masters of survival. You envy it. Back in the hall, dinner preparations are beginning. The cooks bustle around enormous pots of stew, the air filled with onion and smoke. You pass them on your way out, nodding as a cook lifts a ladle and says proudly, "It's hot," which, in this climate, is a victory worth celebrating. Later that night, the fires will burn again. The same rituals will unfold, the shutting of shutters, the tucking in of coals, the blessing before bed. Someone will mutter, "God keep us warm," and the rest will answer, "And our toes too." You can't help but smile. You might not make it through this day without a chill, but you'll make it through the night with a story. And that's something. Night returns like a slow tide. It seeps through the cracks in the shutters, slides over the floor, and fills the corners of the room until everything is wrapped in that familiar gray-blue quiet. The torches sputter, the fire sighs, and somewhere above, an owl hoots, a solitary note carried by the wind. You're back in your chamber. The rushes underfoot are soft, though they still crackle faintly. The bed waits, curtained and shadowed. You can see where someone has already placed the warming pan under the sheets, the faint smell of hot metal mingling with linen and smoke. You sit on the edge of the bed and pull off your shoes. They're stiff with cold. Your toes, ungrateful little creatures, refuse to move for a moment. You rub them, wincing, then laugh softly to yourself. Luxury, you mutter. The word sounds absurd in the half-dark. Outside, the wind picks up, moaning through the narrow slits of the window. You can hear snow or maybe sleet, whispering against the shutters. The castle seems to sigh in sympathy. You lie back, pulling the covers up to your chin. The straw mattress shifts, whispering like old paper. Somewhere beneath the bed, you hear the faint scurry of a mouse. You sigh. It's fine. The mice have as much right to warmth as anyone else. The fire flickers low, painting shadows across the ceiling beams. The air hums with small noises. The pop of wood, the drip of melting frost, the far-off echo of boots on stone. It's strange to think how sleep, this simple daily act, used to be a survival strategy. To sleep in a medieval castle was to trust the fire not to die, the wind not to howl too fiercely, and your blankets not to betray you to frost. People did all sorts of things to make it bearable. They slept in pairs or groups. Even nobles sometimes shared a bed with servants or guests. Privacy wasn't the point, warmth was. One obscure tidbit that often surprises modern historians. Some households even kept chickens or small animals in the sleeping chamber, purely for body heat. Imagine dozing off while a hen quietly clucks at your feet. Not exactly romantic, but undeniably practical. You laugh quietly at the thought. Somewhere, a historian would call it thermal cohabitation. You'd call it desperation with feathers. Still, there's something almost charming about it. People worked with what they had, using instinct and ingenuity instead of thermostats and flannel pajamas. You close your eyes, and the soundscape of the castle begins to blend. The wind, the fire, the sighing of timbers. Sleep comes slowly, like a cat creeping closer, cautious but inevitable. For a while, you drift in and out, half dreaming of warm sunlight and open fields. When you wake again, it's still dark, but softer somehow, the kind of darkness that feels full rather than empty. This, you realize, must be that in-between time, the hours of first sleep, giving way to the quiet interval before second sleep. The world is half asleep, half awake, and you're suspended in it, like a leaf caught between wind and stillness. You imagine, centuries ago, someone else lying in this same position, wrapped in the same fear of cold, the same hope for warmth, listening to the same winter wind. Maybe they whispered a prayer. Maybe they turned over and muttered something about the fire. Or maybe they, too, just stared at the dark and thought, "This bed is softer than the floor." Historians still debate what people dreamed about back then. We can only guess from fragments of letters and prayers. Dreams of warmth, probably, of spring, of the sun rising early and staying long enough to thaw the stones. You smile faintly in the dark, and for a moment, as your breath fogs the air and the fire hums low, you feel it, the faint warmth of understanding across centuries. Humanity hasn't changed much. We still chase comfort in the cold, light in the dark, and stories to make the night a little shorter. The castle sleeps, and soon so do you. Morning arrives not with brightness, but with a soft gray murmur. The castle wakes slowly, as if reluctant to face the cold once again. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows, hoarse, unimpressed. The wind groans along the battlements. A door thuds. A log breaks in the fire, scattering sparks that drift upward like tiny stars trying to escape gravity. You stir, blinking into the dim light. The air is cold enough to make your breath visible, rising like a ghost from your lips. The wool blanket feels heavier now, stiff with the night's frost and a faint smell of smoke. Another day, you mutter, though it's hard to tell if it's encouragement or resignation. Outside your chamber, life resumes its quiet shuffle. The servants are already awake, their footsteps padding across the flagstones. You can hear them tending fires, their voices low and steady. The words blur into a kind of music, an ancient rhythm of domestic survival. A thin beam of light creeps across the wall, filtered through the slit window. It touches the wooden chest at the foot of your bed, where your clothes wait, rough linen, wool, perhaps fur if you're lucky. Dressing in winter is less about modesty and more about physics. Every layer matters. You pull on your tunic and wrap a cloak over your shoulders, feeling the stiffness of cold fabric warm slowly against your skin. You rub your hands together and breathe on them, trying to coax life back into your fingers. In the great hall, breakfast is a solemn affair. Porridge, thick, smoky, steaming faintly, is ladled into wooden bowls. A servant adds a drizzle of honey, and suddenly, it feels like a feast. You eat slowly, listening to the crackle of the hearth. The hall itself is a world of textures. Banners heavy with age, tapestries curling at the edges. A wolf pelt by the fire that looks like it's considering getting up and leaving. The smell of smoke clings to everything, even the bread. Across the room, the Lord yawns, his beard rimed with frost. "We must find better wood," he mutters. His wife, barely awake, stares into her cup of ale. Breakfast beer is not a luxury, it's a necessity. The water, after all, isn't safe to drink. You sip your own cup, the warmth of it spreading through you. It tastes faintly of barley and ash, but it does the job. The talk around the table drifts lazily. News from the nearby village. A pig born with 2 heads, a rumor of wolves near the mill, the eternal complaint that the castle's chimneys never draw properly. Everyone agrees that winter is worse this year. They say that every year. Then comes the strangest part of castle mornings. The cleaning of the rushes. A servant stoops with a wooden rake, gathering old reeds, straw, and bits of herbs from the floor, replacing them with fresh ones scented with lavender and meadowsweet. It's the medieval version of sweeping the carpet, except the carpet is technically biodegradable. One obscure tidbit. People sometimes mixed powdered clay into rushes to absorb moisture. Others added mint or juniper berries to keep away pests and, ideally, unpleasant smells. It's housekeeping that doubles as herbal medicine. You wander toward the great hearth, holding your hands to the flames. The fire burns brighter now, fed by oak and elm. A hound lifts its head, watching you through half-closed eyes, then lowers it again with a groan of deep satisfaction. For a moment, everything feels timeless. The stone, the fire, the quiet pulse of people simply surviving another day. And then, from somewhere outside, a horn blows, sharp and sudden. The whole room freezes. A moment later, laughter ripples through the servants. "Just the hunters," someone says. "They're back early." The tension melts. You smile. It's a reminder that even here, where life feels ancient and grand, most surprises are disappointingly ordinary. Still, the interruption leaves the air humming, full of life again. You step outside, into the cold daylight. The courtyard glitters with frost. The hunters indeed have returned, breath steaming, their cloaks stiff with ice. Behind them, a horse stamps impatiently. You walk past them, through the gate and out along the wall. The view stretches wide and pale. A landscape of fields, frozen rivers, smoke rising from distant huts. It's hard to imagine how anyone slept through nights like these. And yet they did every night for centuries. Wrapped in layers, curled against family, huddled near embers, dreaming of warmer seasons. Historians still debate whether medieval people found comfort in this rhythm or simply endured it. Maybe both. You breathe in deeply, the air sharp and clean, and watch it leave your lungs in little clouds. You feel strangely awake, half of you frozen, half alive. And somewhere deep inside, a sleepy voice says, "Tonight will be cold again." You sigh. It always is. By evening, the castle glows again. Not with warmth exactly, but with habit. The torches are lit. The hearth blazes. The air is thick with the smells of wood smoke, bread, and roasted root vegetables. Shadows dance on the walls like ghosts with better rhythm. Dinner is a slow, theatrical event. Servants move in near silence, carrying trays and pitchers. A minstrel hums quietly near the corner, plucking at a lute that sounds just slightly out of tune. You sit near the edge of the long table, where the light flickers across faces, some bored, some weary, some shining faintly with ale. The Lord toasts to the endurance of his household. "To another night survived," he says dryly, and everyone chuckles softly. You wonder if that joke ever stops being true. Tonight's meal is thick stew again. Meat if you're lucky, onions and barley if you're not. The bread is coarse but fresh. There's cheese, hard and salty, and apples that taste like they're considering retirement. You eat slowly, enjoying the faint absurdity of it all, the pageantry of dinner in a place where everyone can see their breath. Afterward, the talk grows gentle, almost musical. People tell stories of the past. The time lightning struck the chapel roof, the ghost in the pantry, the miracle of St. Martin's cloak. Someone brings up the legend of the warm dream, when a peasant claimed he'd slept so well he saw heaven in his sleep. The table erupts in laughter. There's always humor here. Small, quiet jokes, meant to keep the cold away as much as the fire does. Later, the Lord rises, stretches, and bids everyone good rest. One by one, people drift off to their chambers, their candles bobbing down corridors like tiny stars. You stay a little longer by the hearth. The hall empties slowly, the sound fading until only the crackle of wood remains. You can feel the heat against your knees, the stone cool against your back. There's a moment of stillness so complete that even the fire seems to hesitate. You listen to the creak of rafters, the whisper of wind in the chimney. You can almost hear the castle sleeping already. When you finally rise, your candle throws a thin, trembling circle of light ahead of you. You walk down the hall, past the same tapestries and beams you've seen a dozen times today, though somehow in this dim glow they seem older, heavier, more watchful. At your chamber door you pause. The air smells faintly of ash and wool. You touch the wooden latch. It's smooth, worn by years of tired hands. Inside, the bed waits again, a small island of fabric in a sea of stone. The warming pan has done its work. The sheets feel almost soft. You slip beneath them, exhale, and listen to the castle breathe. Somewhere, down the hall, a baby cries, quickly soothed. A dog barks once, then silence. This, you think, is what it means to survive winter, not through strength but through routine, through the comfort of repetition, of rituals so familiar they start to feel like warmth themselves. One obscure custom you remember hearing about comes to mind. In some castles, people slept with wooden charms under their pillows, tiny carved suns meant to keep the fire of the soul burning. You imagine the charm glowing faintly, a talisman against cold and fear. Historians still debate whether those charms were superstition or psychological necessity. You suspect both. The fire crackles. The wind hums through the shutters. You turn onto your side, feeling the weight of the blankets press against you. Outside, snow begins to fall soft, steady, endless. Covers the battlements, the courtyard, the stables. It silences everything. You close your eyes, sinking slowly into that half-dream where centuries overlap and time softens like melting wax. You can almost hear the murmur of old voices, the sigh of old fires, the heartbeat of a world that never quite warms up, but never stops trying. Sleep comes, gentle and deliberate, and once again the castle endures. Morning again, the same stone ceiling, the same slow breath of frost sneaking through the cracks. It's not that time repeats itself here, it just prefers walking in circles. You wake to the soft sound of someone sweeping outside your door. The rhythmic scrape of the broom against the flagstone has a strange comfort to it. You pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders, just for a few more seconds, pretending you might stay like this forever. The air nips at your nose like a polite but insistent dog. Eventually, you surrender. You sit up, rubbing your eyes, watching your breath form in the gray air. Your toes protest as they touch the floor. Cold stone has a way of teaching humility. Somewhere, far below, the kitchen stirs to life. Pots clang, a door slams, and someone laughs. An echoing laugh that rolls up through the stairwell like a memory of summer. You follow the scent of wood smoke and something vaguely edible. Down the corridor, the rushes have been replaced again, this time with dried lavender and thyme. The air smells like someone tried to bottle sunlight and almost succeeded. In the kitchen, it's chaos in motion. A dozen people move as one, stirring pots, kneading dough, poking at fires. A servant brushes past you, carrying a bucket of water that looks dangerously close to freezing. You're offered a chunk of coarse bread and a cup of warm ale. Breakfast. You eat standing, half awake, half grateful. The cook, a woman with arms like tree trunks, grumbles about how the chimney still smokes too much. This place eats fire like a dragon, she mutters, and you believe her. You notice her hands, red from the cold, and think how every flame in this castle depends on people like her. Always awake, always feeding the hearths that keep everyone else alive. In truth, keeping a castle warm is less about luxury and more about logistics. Fires need tending day and night. Servants carry logs up and ash down. People take turns sleeping closest to the flames, depending on rank, luck, and maybe a bit of bribery. There's an obscure tidbit. Some noble households kept trained fire boys. Young attendants whose only job was to keep embers alive through the night, creeping from hearth to hearth like silent, soot-faced spirits. You imagine one now, crouched by a dying fire, blowing gently until sparks rise like fireflies. He yawns, scratches his nose, and keeps going. No one remembers his name, but everyone owes him sleep. After breakfast, the castle settles into its daily rhythm. Men head to the armory, women to the laundry or weaving room. Children run wild in corridors that were never designed for laughter but somehow hold it anyway. You step into the courtyard, where the snow has hardened into glittering crusts. The sky is pale and merciless, the color of a tired pearl. You walk slowly, the crunch beneath your boots strangely satisfying. You pass the stables, where a stable hand is brushing down a horse, steam rising from its flanks. The animal looks more dignified than anyone else in the castle. He sleeps standing up, the boy says proudly. Doesn't even need a bed. You can't tell if he's bragging about the horse or mocking the humans who don't have that talent. The boy laughs. You laugh. It's good to laugh when your breath looks like smoke. Later, in the afternoon, you find yourself in the castle's warmest room, if you stretch the definition of warm. The light filters in through glass so wavy it makes the world outside look half-dreamed. The air here smells faintly of wax and rosemary. Someone's sewing near the window. Someone else dozes in a chair, their head nodding forward like a sleepy pigeon. You sit by the fire, watching the logs crumble into red dust. The flicker of light paints the walls gold, then gray, then gold again. This is where life slows, where people read aloud, or tell quiet stories, or mend things that have been worn thin by time. There's a strange intimacy to it, the shared silence of survival. You think of how many winters have passed in this same rhythm. Fire, frost, sleep, repeat. You wonder if the people of this castle, 500 years from now, will still dream of warmth in the same way. Historians still debate whether medieval castles were truly as cold as legend says. Some argue the thick stone kept warmth in. Others insist it was like sleeping inside a refrigerator, politely pretending to be architecture. You lean back in your chair. The fire hums. The wind sighs. You close your eyes. You feel the weight of time pressing gently against your skin. For a moment you almost drift, half asleep, half listening to the scrape of thread through fabric. The rhythm is hypnotic. Someone hums an old lullaby about spring coming early. Everyone knows it won't, but it helps to sing anyway. You probably won't make it through this day awake. And honestly, that's fine. Night again, but not quite the same. There's a full moon now, pale and enormous, hanging above the courtyard like a lantern forgotten by the gods. It paints everything silver, the battlements, the trees, even the smoke rising from the chimneys. You walk the corridor slowly, your candle flickering with every draft. The stone walls glow faintly in the moonlight, their shadows shifting as if they, too, are breathing. You can hear footsteps somewhere, soft, hesitant. Maybe a guard making his rounds, or maybe just the castle itself creaking in its sleep. You push open the door to the great hall. It's empty now, but not quiet. The fire murmurs. The air hums with echoes of laughter long gone. You cross the floor, your boots crunching faintly on rushes sprinkled with herbs. The scent of mint and smoke follows you. You stop before the hearth. It's smaller now, the flames reduced to glowing embers. The light pulses softly, a heartbeat in stone. You sit on the bench and hold out your hands, feeling the faint warmth soak into your fingers. It's peaceful, almost too peaceful. Then, a sound. A creak above you, faint but distinct. The rafters shift. A little snow sifts down from a crack in the roof, landing in your lap. You brush it away, amused. Still, you whisper to no one, better than sleeping outside. There's a funny thing about castles. They're huge, imposing, built to endure sieges and storms. But on a cold night like this, they still feel fragile. A gust of wind can moan through the walls and make everyone feel like a child again. You think of the guards up on the parapets, stamping their feet to keep warm, staring into the darkness where the forest meets the sky. You imagine one whispering to another, "Do you think the sun's ever coming back?" And the other answering, "Not tonight." The wind howls just then, as if it heard you thinking. You decide to wander, candle in hand, past the hall, through the chapel. The little space glows dimly, the air smelling of incense and melted wax. Someone has left a candle burning before a wooden statue of Mary. Her face is soft, weary, kind. You bow your head, not to pray exactly, but to rest your thoughts somewhere warm. There's a rumor, half superstition, half wish, that candles blessed in winter never truly go out, even when their flame dies. Their light lingers, people say. You look at the wax dripping down the altar and think maybe that's true. Back in your chamber, your bed waits. The straw mattress creaks as you sit. You reach for the hot brick wrapped in cloth that a servant placed earlier, still faintly warm from the kitchen hearth. You tuck it by your feet and feel a slow wave of gratitude. There's an odd, almost comical satisfaction in realizing that your survival depends on such small things. Fire, blankets, patience, and maybe a few prayers. You lie back, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. Somewhere a shutter bangs loose and someone curses softly in the dark. The sound of boots on stone follows. Then laughter. Then quiet. The fire in your room pops. The shadows flicker across the ceiling like the reflections of waves. You let your thoughts wander, not too far. Just far enough to remember the summer fields, the hum of bees, the long evenings that seemed endless. Those memories are warm even now. Historians still debate whether people in the Middle Ages dreamed differently because of their constant cold, whether their bodies, always on the edge of frost, created deeper, stranger dreams. You close your eyes and smile faintly. Probably, you think. The castle breathes around you. Wood, stone, fire, and sleep. Somewhere in the walls, a mouse scurries, a reminder that even in fortresses, life goes on, small and determined. And as the night deepens, you drift, slowly, softly, like snow falling into silence. Tomorrow will be cold again, but for now you are warm enough. Morning seeps in like a cautious guest. Pale light stretches across the stone walls, warming nothing, but suggesting the idea of warmth, which is almost as good. You wake before the servants' bells, half aware of the sound of distant movement. Boots on stairs, murmurs behind doors, the faint clatter of kindling being stacked. The castle is waking up again, just as it has every morning since you arrived. Your blanket is heavy, scratchy, and strangely comforting. You could almost stay here forever if not for the faint suspicion that frost has crept into your bones. You swing your legs off the bed and instantly regret it. The floor feels like a slab of winter carved by an unfriendly sculptor. Somewhere you swear you hear the stones laughing. The candle on your bedside table has burned nearly to its base, the wax pooled like a frozen lake around the wick. You light a new one, mostly out of spite. Down in the courtyard, the day begins with a chorus of human and animal complaints. Horses snort, dogs bark. Chickens sound deeply unimpressed by existence. A kitchen maid trudges past you, arms full of firewood, muttering a prayer under her breath that might be equal parts devotion and sarcasm. You decide not to interrupt her. As you cross to the main hall, you can feel the cold seep through every draft and seam. Castles weren't built for comfort. They were built for power, defense, and the occasional dramatic banquet. Warmth was an afterthought, much like your comfort right now. At breakfast, someone mentions that a guest has arrived, an important one. A traveling abbot, carrying news from another province. There's a quiet stir of curiosity. Guests mean gossip, and gossip is the closest thing medieval life has to entertainment that doesn't involve frostbite. When the abbot finally appears, his robes are heavy with travel dust, his cheeks red from wind. He looks around with mild disapproval, the way someone might inspect a bed they didn't choose. "You keep your fires small," he observes. The steward replies dryly, "We keep our wood smaller." Everyone laughs, mostly because it's polite. The abbot sits by the hearth, rubbing his hands together. "It's warmer than the monastery," he admits. "At least your mice have manners here." You glance at the wall and see one peeking from a crack, as if offended. Later, as the hall settles back into quiet, you find yourself watching how people layer themselves for warmth. Wool tunics, fur-lined cloaks, shawls wrapped 3 times around the neck. Even the smallest servant seems to wear enough fabric to challenge physics. It's a communal dance of survival by fabric. An odd detail you overhear: in some castles, people used to share beds not just for intimacy, but for body heat, 2, 3, sometimes 4 to a bed. Even travelers were paired off with strangers if the inn was full. It wasn't scandalous, one woman says, shrugging. Just practical, like stacking logs. You decide to interpret that metaphor gently. The day drifts by slowly. You wander through a side passage you've never noticed before, lined with faded tapestries. One shows a hunting scene. Men on horseback chasing a stag through a forest that seems more alive than the hunters themselves. The threads shimmer faintly, catching the weak light. You can almost smell the pine. Historians still debate whether medieval tapestries were hung primarily for decoration or insulation. Standing here, you can feel a faint draft sneaking through the weave. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe someone just really liked the look of horses. By evening, the castle feels smaller, cozier. Fires glow in the grates, and the air hums softly with the murmur of people winding down. You sit again in the great hall, a cup of warm ale in hand. The abbot is telling a story about a monastery where the monks trained a cat to fetch embers from one hearth to another. It never worked, he admits, but it did teach the cat to steal fish. Everyone laughs again, more genuinely this time. The flames dance across their faces, and for a moment, everyone looks almost content. When you return to your chamber that night, you tuck the blankets around yourself with the precision of a professional burrito maker. The air outside howls, the shutters rattle, but you are cocooned in layers of cloth and fatigue. You think, as you drift off, that maybe comfort is just the art of convincing yourself that cold is a story someone else is living. You won't make it through the night without dreaming. You're not meant to. You wake before dawn, not because you want to, but because the cold insists. It pries open your eyes, nudges your toes, whispers, "It's time." You groan, pull the blanket tighter, and pretend for a few seconds that you live in a world where central heating exists. Outside, the castle is still asleep. The air feels suspended, like time has paused to catch its breath. You can hear the faintest creak of wood and the drip of melting frost from the beams above. You step outside your room, candle in hand. The corridor glows dimly, your footsteps muffled by rushes that smell faintly of pine and old smoke. The light trembles on the walls, revealing faint carvings you've never noticed. Flowers, leaves, tiny faces hidden in the stone. Someone centuries ago had too much time and a small chisel. You follow the faint warmth of the kitchen again, drawn by instinct. Inside, the cook is already awake, her breath visible in the air. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asks without looking up. You nod. She gestures to a small stool near the hearth. "Sit. Warm your bones." The fire crackles, sending sparks toward the ceiling. It's strange how such a small flame can change everything. Your mood, your body, your entire sense of survival. You sip from a wooden cup she hands you. Hot water with a slice of dried apple floating in it. Luxury by castle standards. She tells you about a superstition she heard as a child, that if a fire goes out completely on a winter night, the house will forget your name by morning. "So we never let it die," she says, feeding another log to the flames. "Even when everyone's asleep." There's a gentleness in that, a quiet ritual of keeping memory alive through warmth. Later that morning, you join a group in the courtyard, spreading straw along the paths to stop people from slipping on the ice. The sun peers weakly over the horizon, its light more decorative than functional. A knight passes by, yawning, his breath steaming through the visor of his helmet. "Still better than sleeping in armor," he mutters. You imagine that, and immediately appreciate your rough wool blanket a little more. You pause to look at the walls. Up close, they're not smooth but pitted and patched. 1,000 tiny cracks repaired by 1,000 hands. Each repair a memory of someone else's winter. You run your fingers across the surface. It's colder than you expected. As the day wears on, the castle grows busier. A group of women gather by the laundry room, hanging linens near the great fire to dry. They chat softly, their laughter muffled by the steam. One mentions that sometimes, if a sheet freezes on the line, it shatters when you shake it. "Like glass," she says. You laugh, but she's not joking. That's your obscure tidbit for the day, shattering laundry, the poetry of poverty meeting physics. By evening, you're back in the great hall. The abbot is gone, the mice are back, and the fire has been rebuilt into something heroic. Everyone's faces are flushed and golden in the glow. Someone strums a lute softly, playing a tune that sounds older than the walls themselves. You watch as a child curls up by the hearth, head resting on a folded cloak, asleep before the second verse. No one moves him. The fire will keep him warm tonight. Historians still debate whether the medieval concept of comfort was so different from ours, or if we've just forgotten how much warmth can come from proximity, story, and shared light. The fire crackles again. You stretch, the fatigue of the day wrapping you like a second blanket. Outside, the stars are sharp and clear, like ice on velvet. Inside, the world glows softly, as if the castle has decided, for just one night, to remember every name. And as your eyes grow heavy, you think, maybe this is how they survived the cold. Not by fighting it, but by sharing it. You close your eyes. The fire hums. The wind sighs. The castle dreams. You wake to the sound of scraping. A rhythmic, stubborn sound, like someone trying to convince frost to leave the courtyard through brute persistence. You peek out from your narrow window and see two servants wielding wooden shovels, clearing away what the night left behind. Their breaths bloom in the cold air like small, weary ghosts. You stretch under the layers of wool and linen that constitute your bed. The ceiling above you drips slightly, condensation from your own breath caught in the rafters. You wonder briefly if castles were meant to be lived in at all or simply endured with style. There's no point in resisting the day, so you rise. Your clothes are stiff from the cold. When you pull your tunic over your head, it crackles faintly, the fabric having absorbed the chill like memory. Dressing, in this castle, is less a task and more a full-body negotiation. You make your way toward the kitchens again, your unofficial sanctuary. The smell of oats, honey, and wood smoke greets you like an old friend who never left. The cook gives you a nod that passes for affection here. "You look half frozen," she says. You think she means it kindly. You sit near the hearth and watch the morning routine unfold. Servants stomp in with armfuls of logs. Chickens wander boldly underfoot, and the baker yawns so wide you half expect him to swallow his rolling pin. Someone drops a ladle, someone else swears softly, and the castle exhales another day. A squire, barely 15, appears with an announcement. The Lord is hosting a feast tonight. For warmth, he says, as if that explains everything. It's true in a sense. Feasts weren't just for celebration, they were for survival. When the great hall filled with bodies, laughter, and torches, the temperature rose by a few precious degrees. You didn't just eat to live. You feasted to feel human again. You watch as preparations begin. Candles are dipped, benches are scrubbed. The floor is sprinkled with fresh rushes, scented faintly with rosemary. The scent is sharp and sweet, and for a moment you forget the cold entirely. Later, you wander into the hall as decorations go up. A servant climbs a ladder to hang garlands of evergreen along the beams. Keeps the air clean, he says, and the spirits busy. You raise an eyebrow and he adds, busy so they don't bother us. An obscure tidbit, but apparently a practical one. Medieval logic often balanced hygiene with superstition. And to be fair, both probably worked equally well. As dusk falls, the feast begins. The room glows with candlelight, hundreds of tiny flames reflected in goblets, on steel knives, in the soft sheen of roasted meat. The noise is soft at first, the hum of conversation, the occasional clink of cups. Then it grows. Laughter spreads like warmth itself, spilling over tables and into corners. Musicians play slow, lilting tunes that seem to sway the air. You sit near the edge, content to watch. There's a young woman at the far end of the table, her hair braided with ribbons, her face lit gold by the fire. She laughs at something, head tilted back, and you can't help but notice how even joy looks fragile in this place, like a flame that must be guarded. Someone raises a toast. To warmth that stays longer than winter. You join in, your cup raised, the heat of the fire finally reaching your fingertips. Historians still debate how much of medieval life was comfort and how much was endurance. But sitting here, surrounded by flickering light and tired smiles, you suspect it was both, in equal measure. When the music softens and the crowd thins, you step outside for air. The sky is vast and silver, the stars burning clear and cold. For once, the wind doesn't bite. It just whispers. You stand there a while, your breath mingling with the night's, and realize that in a castle like this, warmth is never permanent, but it's always pursued. You return inside, slower, softer, ready for sleep. The fire still glows, and so do you. The next morning begins with fog. Thick, pale, and strange. So dense it turns the courtyard into a dreamscape. The castle walls fade into soft outlines, the world reduced to breath and stone. You move through it carefully, your steps soundless on the damp rushes. Somewhere ahead, a bell rings once, then again, as though even sound must find its footing in this new world. You find the blacksmith working by feel more than sight, hammering metal in the haze. Sparks burst into the mist, glowing briefly before vanishing. He grins at you when he notices your silhouette. Fog means the cold will ease, he says. Eventually. There's not much comfort, but in a castle, hope doesn't need to be logical, just warm enough to keep. Inside the great hall, servants are drying the rushes again. Damp floors breed unpleasant smells, and the scent of pine oil fills the air. A woman scrubs a bench and mutters about the curse of castle living. No matter how much work you do, the cold always wins. You smile faintly. She's not wrong. By midday, the fog thins. You walk along the battlements, looking out over a landscape dusted with frost. Far below, the river snakes through the valley, half frozen and shimmering like polished glass. A knight stands beside you, leaning on the parapet. They say in some places, he tells you, people used to sleep above their animals for warmth. Goats, sheep, anything that breathed. The heat rose through the floorboards. You nod, imagining the smell. Charming, you say. He chuckles. Effective, though. You learn not to be picky. That's your major historical fact for the day. Medieval folk architecture often combined stables and living quarters because practicality always outranked comfort. Later, in the kitchen, the cook tells a different kind of tale. In the dead of winter, she says, stirring a pot, people used to bake stones in the oven, then wrap them in cloth to warm their beds. You picture it. A bed full of glowing rocks and weary dreams. The image is oddly soothing. Historians still debate whether these bed warmers were common practice or regional folklore. But you decide you'll believe it. It's too cozy not to. Evening comes quietly. The fog lingers at the windows, turning the firelight into halos. The castle seems to hum in its own rhythm. Doors creak, distant voices murmur, and a cat curls itself into a perfect circle near the hearth. You sit with a few others, listening to a bard tell a slow, meandering story about a knight who once tried to capture the northern wind in a bottle. He failed, the bard says, but he kept the bottle anyway, and every time he uncorked it, the room grew colder. He said it reminded him of home. Everyone laughs softly. It's not a funny story, exactly, but it's the kind that keeps you awake just long enough to appreciate sleep. You head to your chamber later than usual. The rushlight flickers as you close the door behind you. The air feels less cruel tonight, almost sympathetic. You crawl beneath the layers of cloth, your hands still faintly smelling of pine and smoke. Outside, the fog thickens again, swallowing the moon. The last thing you hear before sleep is the soft crackle of the hearth and the faint murmur of the river below. A reminder that warmth, like time, is never fully ours. You exhale slowly, the breath warm against the air. And just before dreams take you, you think, maybe the secret wasn't how they avoided freezing. Maybe it's how they learned to live with the cold and call it company. You wake to the scent of bread baking and the faint sound of bells far beyond the mist. The air in your chamber still carries the memory of night. It tastes slightly of smoke, wool, and quiet determination. The rushes on the floor are cold beneath your feet as you dress. Outside, the world feels newly made again, as if the frost has rewritten everything it touches. Even the castle walls seem paler today, their gray softened to silver. You wander down to the courtyard and find it alive with motion. Servants carry baskets of kindling, chickens scatter indignantly, and somewhere, a young man is attempting to repair a frozen water trough with a hammer and more confidence than sense. He strikes it, the ice barely budges, and he sighs. It's like arguing with God, he mutters. You decide not to help. You've learned that in a castle, offering assistance usually earns you an extra chore. You step toward the outer bailey. The stables are warm compared to the courtyard, filled with the gentle shuffling of hooves and the earthy perfume of hay. The horses steam faintly in the cold, each breath a puff of warmth against the shadows. You stroke the muzzle of one mare, her skin soft as velvet. The stable hand grins. She's warmer than most rooms here, he says. Some nights, I think about trading places. You think he's joking, but only mostly. There's your historical fact. Some castle servants, especially grooms and stable hands, preferred to sleep in or near the stables in winter. The heat from the animals could mean the difference between numb fingers and survival. Later, you join a small procession heading to the chapel. The stones inside are colder than faith itself, but candles flicker in their holders like tiny, stubborn suns. A monk chants softly, the sound echoing up through the vaulted ceiling, wrapping the air in rhythm. He notices you watching and smiles faintly. Cold sharpens prayer, he says. You can't daydream your way through frostbite. That's one way to stay devout. After the service, you linger outside the chapel. The wind carries the smell of snow and iron from the blacksmith's forge. A thin plume of smoke curls lazily upward, tracing the sky like ink. You make your way there, drawn by the sound of hammering. The blacksmith looks up from his anvil. "You again," he says. "Still not frozen?" "Barely, you admit." He gestures toward the forge's heart, where the coals glow like the core of the earth. "Every castle," he says, "needs two kinds of fire, the kind that keeps the metal alive, and the kind that keeps the people from turning into ghosts." He's poetic for a man covered in soot. As he works, you notice something peculiar on the wall, a horseshoe nailed upside down. "Bad luck," you say. "Good luck," he corrects, "for keeping the warmth from spilling out." It holds it like a cup, an obscure tidbit and oddly lovely. When evening arrives, the temperature drops again. The castle closes its eyes. Doors are barred, tapestries drawn, and fireplaces fed their final logs for the night. You sit by your hearth watching the flames lick at the air. You think about the upside-down horseshoe and how even superstition in the medieval world served a practical purpose. Belief, after all, was a kind of insulation. Historians still debate whether medieval people truly feared the cold or simply accepted it as part of life's contract. Maybe both. Maybe fear and acceptance were the same thing, two sides of the same frozen coin. You stretch, pull the blanket higher, and whisper into the dimness. To warmth that never asks for reason, the fire answers in crackles. And for the first time in days, you sleep without shivering. The castle wakes slower today. A hush lingers in the corridors, as if even the mice are taking their time. You can hear the faint dripping of thaw, snow melting from the battlements, trickling through cracks like water finding its old memories. You move through the hall, past servants yawning into their sleeves. Someone has spilled oats, and a chicken is enthusiastically cleaning it up. You step over both. In the great hall, the hearth still glows faintly from last night's fire. Someone has left a poker leaning against the stone, and when you touch it, it's still warm. That small, accidental warmth feels strangely intimate, like a secret between you and the castle. Breakfast is slow, porridge, bread, a smear of butter if you're lucky. The cook grumbles about running low on fat for frying. "If the traders don't come soon," she says, "we'll be roasting our boots for flavor." You hope she's joking. You're only mostly sure. After breakfast, you walk to the garderobe tower, the medieval toilet, a marvel of both ingenuity and discomfort. The narrow seat perches over an open shaft that drops directly down the outer wall. Cold air rushes up from below like a ghost with opinions. It's one of those experiences that makes you profoundly grateful for modern plumbing. The stone seat is freezing. You remember reading somewhere that medieval people would sometimes bring heated stones wrapped in cloth to sit on. You can confirm the wisdom of that. That's your obscure tidbit. Medieval toilet stones were real enough in wealthier castles, though no one wrote about them with enthusiasm. You emerge quickly, cheeks numb and humility restored. Outside, a trader's caravan has arrived, bells on the horses jingling faintly. The air fills with shouts, the creak of carts, and the sudden, blessed scent of spices. You follow the crowd to the courtyard, where barrels, cloth, and small miracles are being unloaded. One merchant sells beeswax candles, expensive, but cleaner burning than tallow. Another offers cloaks lined with rabbit fur. A third sells little clay bottles of oil for keeping one's joints from freezing. You consider buying them all. The Lord appears briefly, his presence as warm as a tax collector's smile. He nods at the merchants, says something about the blessings of commerce, and disappears back inside. You linger to talk with an older woman selling dried herbs. For the hearth, she says, to make the air sweet. She hands you a bundle tied with red string. You smell rosemary, lavender, and a hint of thyme. That'll chase away the cold, she promises. Or at least make it smell better, you say. She laughs, and her eyes crinkle like old parchment. By evening, the hall is brighter than usual. Candles everywhere, their flames dancing in defiance of winter. The air smells faintly of herbs now, just as she promised. It's not warmth exactly, but it's comfort. You sit by the fire, surrounded by murmurs and the slow rhythm of the castle winding down. Someone tells a story about a knight who once tried to sleep through an entire winter by drinking enchanted mead. He dreamed of summer, they say, then woke up to snow anyway. Historians still debate whether such tales were meant as lessons or just as entertainment for long, cold nights. You suspect it was both. A gentle reminder that no matter what magic you attempt, you still have to survive the season. The night drifts on, gentle and long. You think of the herbs burning faintly near the hearth, the scent of lavender mingling with smoke, and you find yourself smiling. You realize that in this castle, survival isn't just about heat. It's about finding beauty in the drafts and humor in the shivers. You settle into your bed, the new beeswax candle flickering beside you. The wind howls outside, as if announcing your victory. You're still here, still warm enough, still dreaming. And as sleep comes, soft and steady, you think, maybe that's all the warmth anyone ever really needs. The morning begins in blue, the kind of pale, watery blue that only exists before the sun makes up its mind. You're awake early, not because you're eager to be, but because the castle is alive with sounds it shouldn't be making this hour. Doors thudding, boots stomping, distant voices carrying through stone like whispers through a shell. You pull on a cloak and step into the corridor. The air is cold enough to make your breath visible. Somewhere, a hound barks once and then decides it's too early for heroics. Down in the courtyard, a group of men are fussing over something large and awkward. A cart piled high with straw, bundles of rushes, and oddly shaped sacks that bulge like sleeping pigs. The steward stands beside it, frowning with the intensity of someone trying to prevent chaos with limited success. "What's happening?" you ask. "Rush change," says a servant, yawning. "New floor covering. The old rushes have been walked on since last summer." Ah yes, the medieval version of spring cleaning, though it's currently winter and the smell suggests the old rushes had ambitions toward sentience. They begin hauling out the old layers, blackened and matted, filled with crumbs, lost pins, and probably the occasional mouse skeleton. "It's tradition," says the steward, as if that explains everything. There's your historical fact. Rushes, long grasses spread across the floors, were replaced a few times a year in castles. They soaked up dirt, spills, and other less mentionable things. Scented herbs like lavender or rosemary were mixed in to make the air fresh. Though the definition of fresh was clearly flexible, you helped spread the new rushes, green and fragrant, and suddenly the entire hall smells of crushed meadow and sunshine remembered. Someone jokes that this is the only time of year the floor feels alive. "Give it a week," says another, "and it'll be back to being an ecosystem." That earns a laugh. You find yourself smiling too. It's strange how something so simple as a clean floor can lift spirits. Later in the day, you walk toward the castle kitchen. The door is open, releasing a wave of heat and the smell of bread, onions, and ambition. Inside, the cook is orchestrating chaos with a ladle like a general commanding troops. She waves you over. "Try this," she says, thrusting a spoon toward you. You taste it. Warm, earthy, full of root vegetables and faint sweetness. "Parsnip stew," she says, "thick enough to keep your ribs company." She explains that parsnips were a medieval staple, eaten more often than potatoes, which hadn't yet arrived from the New World. "They say parsnips make you strong," she adds, "and possibly attractive." You tell her she's never looked stronger. She smacks your arm with the ladle. By evening, the new rushes gleam in the candlelight, and the castle feels almost hospitable. People linger longer in the hall. A musician plucks a slow tune on a lute. A child giggles when the hound tries to chase the dancing shadows on the wall. Historians still debate whether castles were truly miserable in winter or if stories exaggerated their discomfort. But tonight, with the floor sweet-smelling and the stew still warming your stomach, you suspect the truth is somewhere in between. And as the fire crackles softly beside you, you decide that sometimes survival depends less on temperature and more on rhythm, on how a place breathes through the cold. You drift towards sleep again, lulled by lute strings and laughter, the scent of new rushes clinging to the air like a lullaby. When you wake, the world is silent except for the slow creaking of timbers shifting with the temperature. The frost outside has turned the courtyard into a field of glass. Every breath you take hangs briefly in the air before fading into the gray. You wrap yourself in wool and head toward the outer wall. The guard on duty nods to you from beneath his hood, his beard iced over like a monument to endurance. "Cold enough for you?" he says. You glance at his breath freezing midair. "Just barely tolerable." He grins, showing teeth white as snow. "Good. Means you're still alive." You walk the ramparts together. The wind slices through your cloak, but the view is worth it. The valley below glazed in light, the river frozen in ribbons, the world paused like a painting waiting for movement. The guard tells you stories to pass the time, of winter sieges where fires were forbidden because smoke gave away positions, of watchmen who fell asleep standing up, of one unfortunate fellow who supposedly froze mid-blink. "That one's probably an exaggeration," he admits. "Probably," you say. The stone beneath your boots is cold but steady, and you wonder how many centuries have felt exactly like this. One person watching the horizon, trying to pretend that shivering is noble. That's your historical fact for this section. Castle guards truly did keep night and dawn watches even in the coldest months, often wrapped in layers of wool and fur, with small braziers only allowed where their glow couldn't betray the castle's position. When your walk ends, you descend into the inner court, grateful for even the faint heat rising from the kitchen chimneys. The cook has left buckets of slush near the door, where melting snow drips into muddy puddles. You nearly slip. A passing stable hand grabs your arm, grinning. "First fall of the day," he declares as if it's an honor. Inside, the castle hums faintly. A servant scrapes frost off the inside of a window with a knife, muttering about how the glass sweats when the fire's lazy. Another is repairing mittens with thick thread, his fingers raw but steady. By the hearth, two older women are gossiping. You catch bits of their conversation. Apparently, someone slept in the laundry room last night because the linens were still warm from drying. You raise an eyebrow. One of them catches your look and nods sagely. "Best spot in the castle," she says. "Smells like soap and feels like summer." There's your obscure tidbit. Some servants did, in fact, sleep among freshly dried laundry or near ovens to steal a little heat. As dusk settles, the sky turns purple and gold. the kind of color combination you'd find only in illuminated manuscripts. The castle quiets again, save for the distant clatter of a closing gate and the occasional hoot of an owl. You linger by your window, watching your breath fog the glass. Below, torchlight flickers along the walls, tiny embers against the endless dark. Historians still debate how comfortable or miserable medieval castle life truly was. But as you settle once again by the fire, the blanket heavy across your knees, you realize comfort is relative. In this cold, even a spark feels divine. You stretch, yawn, and smile to yourself. You probably won't make it through this night, you whisper, echoing your own earlier warning. But maybe you don't have to, because some nights, surviving is simply an act of imagination, keeping the idea of warmth alive until morning remembers you again. The fire sighs, the frost thickens, and the world drifts softly, sleepily, toward tomorrow. Morning again, but the kind of morning that forgets to happen. You wake to a dim, pewter light leaking through the arrow-slit window, too weak to be called sunlight. The air in your chamber feels like it's made of silk and frost, thin, quiet, and very slightly painful. The blanket crackles when you move, frozen in the folds. Your breath fogs above you in tiny ghosts. You lie there for a long moment, listening to the faraway noises of the castle waking up. The uneven ring of a hammer from the forge, the faint bleating of sheep somewhere beyond the walls, the murmur of someone cursing in the stables. All of it blends into a kind of sleepy rhythm, like the heartbeat of the place. You eventually decide that if you lie still any longer, you'll merge with the bedding and become part of the archaeological record. So you sit up, pull on your wool tunic, and step into boots that feel like two small glaciers. Downstairs, the great hall smells of smoke and porridge. Servants move like ghosts, heads wrapped in cloth, hands hidden in sleeves. A few squires are huddled around the fire, roasting their boots near the flames. They nod as you pass, too chilled for speech. On a side table, the steward has laid out a few curious objects, candles of varying sizes and colors. Winter stock, he explains, counting them. Beeswax for the Lord's chamber, tallow for everyone else. He holds up a tallow candle. Sheep fat and ashes. Smells like a sermon about humility. That's your historical fact. Candles in medieval castles were made either from beeswax, pleasant-smelling and expensive, or tallow, cheap, smoky, and less delightful. The quality of your candle said a great deal about your social rank. He lights one, and the faint odor of singed mutton fills the air. You wander toward the kitchens again, drawn by the scent of something better. Bread, maybe, or hope. The cook, looking more heroic than usual, is stirring a massive pot. She glances up. You again, she says. You've got the face of someone looking for warmth disguised as breakfast. She's not wrong. She ladles you a portion of what looks like barley and onions. Eat that, she says. It'll keep your soul from shivering. You take a bite. It's simple, hearty, and utterly devoid of glamour. Exactly what you need. Outside, the world remains colorless. The courtyard is coated in frost so thick it looks powdered by flour. A stable hand walks past leading a horse, both steaming like kettles. He waves. Bit cold, he shouts. You shout back. Is it? He grins without answering. By afternoon, snow begins to fall again. Not a storm, but a slow, lazy drift that seems to think it has all eternity to arrive. You watch it from the tower stairs, each flake spinning like a thought you almost had but forgot. In the chapel below, someone is singing softly. The sound rises like smoke, thin, pure, and surprisingly warm. It's the laundress, her voice carrying through the stones. She's singing a lullaby in a language you don't recognize. A guard passing by pauses to listen. "That song's older than this castle," he murmurs. "They say it's about the stars watching people sleep." There's your obscure tidbit. Medieval songs often doubled as prayers or charms for protection during the night, when the dark was considered alive with both danger and mystery. You close your eyes, letting her voice fill the space around you. For a moment, it's easy to forget the cold, the hunger, the layers of wool scratching your neck. Historians still debate whether such songs were meant as entertainment or ritual, but here, under these echoing arches, it hardly matters. You head to bed early that night, and for once, your blanket feels almost warm. Perhaps the secret isn't heat, but harmony. The idea that warmth can come from voices and stories shared between walls. Tonight, the castle is wrapped in a strange kind of quiet. Not peaceful, just waiting. The kind of quiet that comes when snow has buried everything and even the wind has grown tired. You wake briefly in the middle of the night. The fire has gone out. Your room is darkness and chill, the kind that seeps through skin into thought. For a long time you lie there, tracing the shape of your breath in the air. Then, faintly, you hear footsteps outside. Slow, careful. You slip from your bed, wrap your blanket around your shoulders, and open the door. It's the watchman again, the one with the frost-tipped beard. He's carrying a lantern that burns like a pocket of gold. "Couldn't sleep," he says, shrugging. "The cold keeps poking me awake." You follow him into the corridor. Together, you walk through the castle's sleeping body, past the silent hall, the shuttered chapel, the stables that murmur with dreaming horses. He tells you about the watchman's hour, a strange ritual among guards, when one walks the circuit and recites a verse or two to keep awake. Some sing, some pray, some mutter poetry. "I just talk to the walls." You glance at him. Do they answer? Sometimes, he says deadpan. He hands you the lantern, and its light makes the stone glow like honey. Shadows move lazily across the walls, bending and stretching as if they, too, are trying to stay warm. That's your historical fact. Night watches were a crucial part of castle life. Guards made rounds through dark corridors to ensure fires didn't go out and that no enemy, or mischief, slipped through the gates. Many sang or prayed to pass the time. In the great hall, you pause before the hearth. Someone has stacked new logs but forgotten to relight them. You kneel and coax a small flame to life. The watchman nods approvingly. "You've got the touch," he says. "Survival instinct," you reply. "Or vanity." He chuckles. "Same thing most nights." You sit together in front of the fire until it grows steady again. The air softens, the silence settles, and the castle seems to breathe with you. Outside, snow presses against the windows like 1,000 quiet hands. He tells you a story about an old superstition that each snowflake contains the breath of a sleeping ancestor. "That's why we stay quiet in winter," he says. "Don't want to wake them all up at once." You smile. "That sounds peaceful." He nods. "It is, unless they start snoring." Your obscure tidbit, delivered gently by an accidental philosopher. Medieval people often saw natural phenomena, snow, mist, even the northern lights, as messages or living presences, not just weather. You eventually return to your room. The fire's warmth lingers faintly, the kind that hums instead of burns. Historians still debate how much medieval people truly feared the dark, or if that fear was mostly literary invention. But as you curl beneath your blanket, the answer seems obvious. They didn't fear it, they respected it. The dark was part of the world's breathing, not its absence. The watchman's footsteps fade. The fire sighs one last time. And you, somewhere between thought and dream, hear the castle whisper softly in return. You wake to the sound of dripping water. A slow, rhythmic note echoing through the chamber like an absent-minded musician playing one string. It's snowmelt, droplets falling from the roof beams where frost gave up its hold overnight. The first thing you notice is that your breath doesn't hang so thickly in the air. The cold has eased, just slightly. A false spring, the servants might call it. A brief kindness before the world remembers it prefers discomfort. You rise, stretch, and walk to the narrow slit of a window. The landscape outside is dazzling. The snow glitters in the early sun, each flake turning the light into a tiny mirror. The courtyard is alive again. Men breaking ice in buckets, women shaking out bedding, dogs barking for no apparent reason except that being loud is warm. You hear the faint clang of a bell. Breakfast or something pretending to be. Downstairs, the great hall smells of smoke and bread. The cook has achieved a miracle. A loaf, not burned at the edges. You sit at the long table, joining the others, steward, guards, maids, a scribe half asleep in his cup. Someone cracks a joke about the scribe's ability to nap through entire winters. He's like a bear, a guard says, except less useful. You smile. The scribe stirs. I'm conserving energy, he mutters. For history, that earns a rare laugh. Today's major historical fact. Even inside stone castles, temperatures could drop below freezing in winter. Nobles and servants alike wore layers of wool, fur, and linen, sometimes sleeping in their clothes. Nightcaps weren't just cute accessories. They were insulation for survival. You wrap your hands around a wooden mug of something vaguely warm. The heat seeps into your fingers like forgiveness. As you drink, a young servant girl enters with an armful of straw. She begins stuffing it into the gaps along the doorframe. You watch curious. Drafts, she says. They sneak in like gossip. Obscure tidbit unlocked. In medieval winters, people often used straw or moss to plug cracks in walls and doors, an early form of insulation. Sometimes they even lined their clothes with dried grasses for extra warmth. Fashion, meet desperation. By mid-morning, the castle begins to hum again with its daily rhythm. You wander to the solar, the upper room where sunlight, when it can be found, streams through narrow glass panes. It's warmer there, filled with tapestries, cushions, and a cat so round it looks like a fur hat with legs. A noblewoman sits by the window, stitching. Her hands are pale and quick, moving through the fabric like thought. You stand beside her, watching. Do you ever get tired of winter? You ask. She doesn't look up. Winter teaches patience, she says. And patience teaches stories. You tilt your head. Stories. She nods. When it's too cold to work, we talk. When it's too dark to sew, we remember. The fire keeps the hands warm, and memory keeps the heart. You realize then that the castle's warmth isn't just physical. It's cultural, communal, sustained by repetition and words. She tells you a story about a ghost that visits the tower each January, searching for its lost slipper. You raise an eyebrow. It's true, she insists. Or mostly. Historians still debate whether medieval ghost tales reflected actual beliefs or simply served as fireside entertainment. But here, the truth feels irrelevant. The point is the telling, the way stories wrap around cold like blankets. By dusk, the day's warmth fades again. The noblewoman closes her sewing kit, the cat stretches, and somewhere, A bell rings for evening prayers. You walk back to your chamber through torchlit corridors. The air tastes of smoke and supper. The castle is quiet but not silent. It murmurs, creaks, sighs. It lives. As you slip beneath your blanket, you realize you've stopped shivering without noticing. Maybe warmth isn't a thing you find. It's something that finds you, once you've been still long enough to deserve it. The next morning, snow falls again, but softer this time, like it's remembering how to be kind. You wake early, not because of the cold but because of the noise. Laughter, clattering dishes, and the rhythmic thud of something heavy being dropped repeatedly. When you go downstairs, you discover the reason. The servants are crushing frozen laundry with wooden mallets. Loosens the fibers, the laundress explains, and the frustration. She offers you a turn. You take the mallet and strike. The sound echoes satisfyingly off the stone. Therapy, you say. She grins. Exactly. Laundry for the soul. There's your major historical fact. In the absence of warm water during harsh winters, medieval laundresses sometimes used cold beating to soften frozen fabrics before washing. Laundry was both labor and endurance. Later, you join the blacksmith by the forge, a room so blessedly warm you half consider never leaving. The air smells of iron and smoke. Sparks leap like orange snowflakes. He wipes his brow. Funny thing, he says, we fear the cold, but it keeps us alive. No pests, no rot. Even the walls stand tighter in frost. You nod. And people too? He smiles. Only if we huddle. Obscure tidbit. Winter in medieval life was when tools, clothes, and even bodies were repaired. Blacksmiths mended plowshares. Women rewove wool. It was the season of maintenance, not growth. A slow rhythm the modern world rarely remembers. You linger in the forge, hypnotized by the glow of the coals. Each one looks like a secret keeping itself alive. By evening, you find yourself outside in the courtyard, snowflakes collecting on your cloak. The sky glows dimly, the color of pewter and milk. A group of children runs past, shrieking with laughter. They're rolling something large and uneven, 3 stacked spheres of packed snow. You realize with delight, the first snowman. They dress it with sticks for arms and a turnip for a face. Looks like the steward, one child yells. Everyone laughs, including the steward, who happens to walk by at that exact moment. He glares for a moment, then breaks into a grin. Needs more straw hair. Historians still debate when exactly the first snowman appeared in Europe, but drawings of snow figures date as far back as the 14th century. If you squint, you might say you've just witnessed one of history's most charming inventions. The laughter fades as night creeps back in. Torches flicker along the walls. The air grows sharp and crystalline. You climb the stairs to your chamber once more, feeling oddly light. The cold is still there, but it no longer feels like an enemy. It's become something else. A reminder that warmth, however fleeting, is meant to be shared. As you lie down, you think of the noblewoman's ghost, of the laundress's frozen linens, of the blacksmith's glowing forge. Each of them held their own flame against the dark. And maybe that's the quiet lesson of medieval winter life. The goal was never to escape the cold. It was to learn how to glow within it. Outside, snow falls without sound. Inside, your fire hums softly, as though it understands. The last thing you hear before sleep takes you is the slow, rhythmic creak of the castle beams settling in the night. An ancient lullaby made of wood, wind, and time. Morning comes slow and pearled, gray light seeping through the shutters like a secret too tired to hide. You stretch beneath your layers of wool and linen, listening to the castle wake one heartbeat at a time. Somewhere down the corridor, a door creaks, then the sound of a broom scratching over stone. A rooster crows far too enthusiastically, as though auditioning for an opera no one asked to hear. You rise, tug on your cloak, and walk toward the great hall, guided by the scent of baked barley and wood smoke. Today feels different, less bitter, almost expectant. Someone has placed fresh rushes on the floor, their clean, green smell rising with every step you take. They crinkle softly under your boots, like whispers of spring rehearsing their lines. At the table, the steward greets you with a weary nod. "Another day survived," he says, "and another to attempt." You both smile. That's about as optimistic as mornings get in a medieval castle. You sit, accept a bowl of thin porridge, and blow on the steam that curls upward. It tastes faintly of honey and ash, breakfast of champions, if by champions one means people barely hanging on to consciousness. Major historical fact of the day. Castles often relied on rush floors, layers of reeds or straw scattered to cover the cold stone. These were replaced periodically, though not as often as you'd like to imagine. In noble homes, they were sometimes perfumed with herbs like lavender or rosemary. In less noble ones, they mostly smelled like life. And by life, we mean animals, people, and the occasional lost spoon. After breakfast, you wander into the chapel. It's cold but bright, the air heavy with incense and echo. The priest stands near the altar, mumbling prayers through a mist of his own breath. You sit quietly, more for warmth than piety. The candles cast golden halos on the stone. For a moment, the world feels hushed and holy. Beside you, an old woman kneels, her fingers moving over her rosary. She notices you watching. "They say prayers warm the heart," she murmurs. "But I prefer fur." You grin. "A pragmatic theology." She chuckles softly, then goes back to her beads. Outside, the world glitters. The moat is frozen solid, and a couple of reckless boys are testing it with sticks. You watch them through the narrow window, thinking about how even in the bleakest winters, play finds a way. Here's your obscure tidbit. In medieval times, frozen moats and ponds sometimes served as impromptu skating rinks. Those skates were made from animal bones, not metal. People tied them to their shoes with leather straps and glided awkwardly across the ice. It was less Olympic elegance, more please don't die experimentation. By mid-afternoon, the castle stirs with unexpected energy. Someone is hauling logs into the great hall, and a group of servants is setting up benches and candles. "What's happening?" you ask. "Story night," a boy says, eyes wide. "The lady's orders." No one freezes when they're laughing. You stay, of course. As darkness falls, the fire crackles high and orange, licking shadows up the walls. People gather close, shoulders touching, mugs steaming. The steward starts with a tale about a knight who fell asleep during his own duel, snoring so loudly that his opponent surrendered out of confusion. A burst of laughter ripples through the hall. Then the noblewoman, the one with the sewing, tells a story about a cursed goose that refused to stop laying eggs. By the end, she says, the farmer was buried in omelets. It's absurd and wonderful. You laugh until your eyes water, not because the stories are perfect, but because everyone else is laughing too. The castle, for once, feels alive in every stone. When the last candle gutters and the last giggle fades into yawns, you head to bed. The cold greets you like an old friend, but softer now. You nestle into your blanket and smile. You probably won't make it through this night, at least not awake. The next morning, Sunlight spills through the window like melted gold. You blink, half convinced it's a dream. It's astonishing how quickly your body adjusts to comfort. After weeks of shivering, a hint of warmth feels like divine intervention. You walk through the courtyard, squinting. The snow has begun to thin in places, revealing patches of mud like old parchment beneath white ink. Birds dart between the ramparts, daring the air to hold them. In the distance, you hear someone chopping wood. That steady rhythm, thwack, pause, thwack again, sounds like the heartbeat of the castle itself. The woodcutter nods as you pass. "Good day for it," he says. "Logs split better when they're half frozen." You stop, curious. "Is that true?" He shrugs. "So they say. Or maybe we just like pretending the cold's useful." Major historical fact. Medieval households relied heavily on firewood economies. Gathering, splitting, and stacking logs was a year-round concern, especially for castles where fireplaces burned almost constantly. The forests surrounding an estate were as important as the walls themselves. You thank the woodcutter and continue walking. The air feels different today, still crisp, but with a scent of damp earth beneath the frost. Somewhere in that smell is a whisper of spring. In the kitchen, the cooks are busy experimenting. You watch as they pour thick batter onto a flat stone over the fire. "We're making hotcakes," one says. "For Lent. Is that allowed?" You ask. She smirks. "Depends on who's watching. The cakes are rough and smoky, but they taste heavenly." You burn your fingers on the first bite and don't care. Obscure tidbit. In medieval times, Lenten fasting often inspired creative loopholes. Monks argued that beavers counted as fish and could therefore be eaten on fasting days. Historians still debate whether this was genuine theology or collective wishful thinking. Later that afternoon, you find yourself in the upper tower. The air is still and blue. From here, you can see miles of frozen countryside, fields like folded linen, forests like spilled ink. The wind hums through the arrow slits, a low, unending song. You sit by the wall, feeling the stone beneath your hand. It's cold, yes, but there's a quiet strength in it. These walls have outlasted kings, storms, winters, and whims, and they still stand. You close your eyes, listening. Somewhere below, a bell rings. Slow, measured, familiar. The rhythm of time itself. As evening comes, clouds return, dark and heavy. Snow begins again, though lightly, like a tired encore. Back in your chamber, you add another log to the fire. The flames rise and stretch, painting the walls in gold. You can almost see faces in the flicker. Servants, knights, cooks, all those who've warmed themselves here across centuries. You wonder how many of them lay awake, as you do now, listening to the same crackle and thinking the same thought. Will spring ever come? Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. The castle doesn't care. It's patient. You, on the other hand, find yourself lulled by the rhythm of survival. The snow taps at the window like a polite ghost. The fire hums its lullaby. And as you sink beneath the blankets, warm and drowsy, you realize that medieval nights weren't silent. They were soft symphonies of persistence. The world was cold, yes, but it never stopped trying to be warm. You wake to a draft that feels like someone left the door open to the Arctic. Except, of course, there's no door in your chamber. Just a curtain and a hole in the wall that's pretending to be a window. The fire's out. Your breath fogs in front of your face like you've turned into a reluctant dragon. Still, the air smells faintly of ash and bread. That's the castle's way of saying, "Congratulations, you survived another night without freezing solid." You drag yourself out of bed, wrap a cloak around your shoulders, and shuffle toward the great hall. The stones underfoot feel less like flooring and more like an icy baptism. Downstairs, the fire's already roaring again. Servants move like ghosts, quiet, layered in wool, faces half hidden by steam. Someone's stirring a pot of something grayish that could either be porridge or early medieval cement. You take a bowl, nod a sleepy thanks, and sit near the flames. "Cold night?" the steward asks, pouring himself ale because, apparently, morning beverages are a matter of personal philosophy. "Like sleeping inside a cloud made of knives," you reply. He chuckles. You get used to it. Eventually, you stop noticing the cold. Or you die. Exactly. It's the kind of grim humor that keeps medieval people alive. Major historical fact: castles weren't uniformly warm, even near the hearth. Most heat escaped straight up the chimney or leaked through unsealed walls. People wore bedrobes, slept in pairs, and kept small dogs near their feet for warmth. Little lapdogs were, quite literally, medieval hot water bottles with opinions. You picture a noblewoman tucked in her massive bed, surrounded by blankets, servants, and a small dog snoring indignantly. Somewhere in history, that dog was probably the warmest soul in the entire kingdom. Later in the morning, you find yourself wandering through the laundry courtyard. There, several women are rinsing sheets in near-freezing water, their hands red and raw. They laugh anyway, talking, teasing, flicking water at one another. One hums a tune that seems older than the stones themselves. You ask, "Doesn't it hurt?" She shrugs, smiling. "Everything hurts. Might as well sing." That line sits with you. Maybe it always has. Obscure tidbit: medieval laundresses sometimes added urine to their washing mix because it contained ammonia that acted as a natural detergent. You can't smell it in this story, but trust us, you'd notice. Historians still debate whether this was common in castle settings or more frequent in towns. By midday, the snow starts again. Soft, unbothered, endless. You find yourself near the stables, watching the horses stamp and snort in their stalls. Their breath rises in clouds, thicker than yours. One of the grooms offers you a cup of hot ale spiced with clove. It's strange, warm, slightly sour, but it works. The kind of drink that reminds you that warmth isn't always comfortable, just alive. He says, "They say horses dream standing up. Do you believe that?" He looks at the animal, massive, steady, eyes half shut in the steam. "I think they dream of spring. Same as us." That evening, after a long day of chores, you join the others for supper. There's laughter again. Small, tired laughter, the best kind. Someone plays a lute, badly but earnestly. When the fire burns low, and the last note fades, you slip away. Your room greets you with a familiar chill, but it's a friendly one now. Predictable, almost companionable. You crawl into bed, pull the covers up to your nose, and listen to the castle breathe. You'll make it through this night. You've learned how. Outside, the world is white again. Snow clings to every ledge, every branch, every dream that thought it could escape winter. From your window, the landscape looks frozen mid-thought. The castle stirs slower than usual. You can hear people moving below, but even the clatter of pots feels muffled, as if wrapped in wool. You decide to walk the ramparts, because, really, if you're going to freeze, might as well do it with a view. The wind greets you with open arms. Icy, insistent, unromantic. Your cloak flaps behind you like a flag of mild regret. But the world up here is breathtaking. Beyond the walls, The forest glows under a pale sun. You can see faint trails, animals or travelers, it's hard to tell. Somewhere out there, a hawk circles lazily. A guard nearby stamps his feet and mutters. "I've been up here since dawn," he says. "The cold's crawled into my bones." You offer him a sympathetic look. "Have you tried not freezing?" He snorts. "I thought of that. Doesn't work." Major historical fact. Guards on watch duty rotated frequently in winter, sometimes every hour. Even with layers of wool and fur, exposure could lead to frostbite or worse, a permanent dislike of fresh air. You leave him to his post and descend toward the kitchens again. The smell of roasted onions and salted pork fills the corridor. The cooks are in full command of their small kingdom, clanging pans like weapons against the cold. One offers you a sample of what she calls castle stew. It's rich, salty, and suspiciously lumpy. You ask what's in it. She grins. "Whatever was closest." That's about as medieval a recipe as it gets. Obscure tidbit. Some cooks in noble households secretly added wine to stews to appease the spirits of the hearth. Whether that worked or not, it certainly made dinner more cheerful. Historians still debate whether this was superstition or just an excuse for a midday drink. After lunch, you wander to the solar, the warmest room in the castle. Sunlight floods through the high windows, striking tapestries and making them glow like painted silk. A group of women sit around the hearth, spinning flax into thread. Their hands move rhythmically, gracefully. One hums a melody about spring returning on the back of a bird. You sit with them, content just to watch. One of them gestures at the spinning wheel. "Would you try?" You do awkwardly. The spindle jerks, the thread snaps. The women laugh softly, not cruelly, just kindly amused. "Not bad for your first," one says. "You'll get it by next winter." "Do I have to?" you ask. She smiles. "No one has to, but it passes the time." Evening falls early. Candles are lit one by one, their flames trembling like tiny suns. The castle hums again. The sound of footsteps, with crackling, distant voices. You sit by the fire in your chamber, the light flickering across the walls. The shadows seem to breathe with you. You think of the guard on the wall, the cooks in the kitchen, the women spinning in the solar. Everyone in this cold world finding small, stubborn ways to be warm. You wrap yourself tighter in your blanket, sigh, and let the fire's light fade behind your eyelids. Outside, snow falls again. Soft, endless, indifferent. Inside, you're warm enough to dream. And in dreams, the castle never freezes. You wake before dawn, to the faint sound of someone hammering outside. Not the kind of hammering that builds something new, but the slow, steady kind that repairs something old and stubborn. The castle's heartbeat. You wrap a cloak around yourself and shuffle toward the courtyard. Your breath turns into ribbons of fog, catching the firelight from a single torch. A blacksmith is already awake, shaping iron in the cold. The anvil rings through the morning mist, sparks flicking like fireflies who've made bad life choices. He's working on hinges for a door that froze shut during the night. You nod to him. He grunts. That's basically a full conversation before sunrise in medieval terms. You notice his hands, scarred, steady, cracked from frost. He plunges the metal into water, steam rising in a ghostly hiss. He says quietly, "Iron doesn't care if it's winter. It just waits for the next fire." You don't know if that's wisdom or exhaustion, but it feels like both. You walk toward the great hall. The air is filled with the faint sound of someone singing. A voice, thin but bright, echoing from the chapel. You follow it. Inside, A priest lights candles with trembling fingers. His voice wavers as he chants the morning prayers. The flames cast long shadows across the stone, like slow-moving spirits stretching after sleep. Major historical fact: castle chapels were among the warmest indoor spaces, not because of divine insulation, but because they were often built beside kitchens or under solars. Heat rose through the walls, blessing the faithful by accident. You sit in silence for a while, not praying exactly, but listening. The air feels holy in the simplest sense, quiet, warm, alive. When the priest finishes, he nods toward you. Cold morning, always. He chuckles. Then God bless the hearth. You can't argue with theology like that. Later, you step into the castle gardens, or what's left of them. The herbs are dead or sleeping, save for the hardy rosemary and thyme. A thin frost covers everything like sugar on pastries you'll never afford. A servant is scraping ice from a small pond with a wooden board. "We'll cut blocks of it later," she says. "For storage." You blink. "Ice? For storage?" She nods proudly. "We keep it in straw underground. For summer feasts." Obscure tidbit: wealthy castles sometimes stored ice year-round, preserving it in deep pits layered with straw and hay. It was medieval refrigeration before refrigerators had the decency to exist. Historians still debate how effective it truly was, but people swore by it. By midday, you're in the kitchen again, warming your hands near the oven's mouth. Someone slides a pie toward you. Not sweet, but filled with minced meat, onion, and something mysterious that tastes faintly of adventure and regret. You take a bite. "Delicious," you say, mostly because you've learned that's the safest answer. The cook smirks. "That's because I didn't tell you what's in it." Sometimes ignorance is flavor. You spend the rest of the day helping patch tapestries in the great hall. The slow work, needle through fabric, pull, knot, repeat. The rhythm becomes hypnotic. You listen to the gossip swirling around you. Who's courting who stole bread, who saw a ghost in the tower. By nightfall, the fire is roaring again. Someone strums a lute. The castle breathes, content in its old, weary bones. You fall asleep near the hearth this time, wrapped in a blanket that smells faintly of smoke and lavender. Outside, winter tightens its grip, but you've learned how to live inside it. When you wake, the world is wet. Rain, not snow. The first in weeks. It drums on the shutters, a soft applause from the heavens. The air smells like melted frost and clean stone. You stand by the window watching droplets race down the glass. Somewhere below, the stable boys are shouting, trying to herd restless horses that don't appreciate the change in weather. You pull on your boots and step outside. The mud welcomes you like an overeager friend, grabbing, squelching, absolutely committed to the relationship. The courtyard looks different in rain. The gray stone gleams, the moat ripples, and the banners drip sadly like forgotten laundry. But the world feels alive again. Even the pigeons seem optimistic. In the corner, an elderly woman is spreading rushes across the floor of the great hall. She moves slowly but surely, replacing the old, moldy layer with fresh-cut greenery. You help her for a while, spreading handfuls of mint and sweet woodruff among the rushes. The smell is fresh, sharp, and unexpectedly comforting. She says, "The herbs keep the fleas away, or at least confuse them." Major historical fact: castles didn't have carpets as we know them. Floors were often covered with layers of rushes, replaced seasonally. Herbs like lavender, thyme, and meadowsweet were added to disguise odors and deter pests. Whether that worked or not, historians remain politely skeptical. You glance at the fire pit nearby. Steam rises from damp logs. Someone curses softly as the flames sputter. You and the woman share a grin. Everyone in a medieval castle learns patience from a damp hearth. Later, you wander to the armory. Squires are polishing armor, the air thick with the scent of oil and metal. You touch one of the helmets, cold, heavy, absurdly uncomfortable looking. One squire laughs. You could sleep in that if you like. I'd rather sleep in a pond. Same thing after a few hours of rain. Obscure tidbit. Some knights used padded linen hoods, arming caps, under their helmets for warmth and cushioning. A damp one, however, was about as comfortable as wearing a wet sponge on your head. You spend the afternoon helping mend blankets, which turns into an informal storytelling session. An old maid tells a tale about a ghost that lingers near the kitchen well, forever searching for her lost ladle. You ask, "Why a ladle?" She shrugs. Ghosts get sentimental too. It's the sort of folklore that passes for indoor entertainment when your Netflix is a fire pit. Evening brings a soft pink sky and the faint sound of rain easing off. You walk to the battlements once more, the air crisp and clear. The horizon glows faintly gold, and for the first time in weeks, you can smell earth instead of snow. You lean against the parapet, close your eyes, and just listen. The wind, the trickle of runoff, the faint laughter below. It's all part of the same quiet rhythm. The castle isn't just surviving winter. It's remembering spring. You head back to your chamber, light a single candle, and sit on the edge of the bed. The wax drips like slow seconds. You whisper to yourself, "Another night survived." And then you smile because survival, it turns out, is an art form. The candle flickers once, twice, and the room falls into a gentle golden dark. The fire sighs, the castle dreams, and somewhere beyond the walls, the first frog croaks. A promise that warmth is on its way. You wake to a warmth that isn't from fire. It's sunlight, actual sunlight. Thin streams of gold crawl through the shutters, dust motes swirling in their path like sleepy fairies on their morning commute. The air is still cool, but there's a softness to it, like the castle finally exhaled after holding its breath all winter. You step outside, blinking into the light. The courtyard glistens with dew. A dog stretches and yawns, its fur steam-laced in the sun. Servants move slower today, not out of laziness, but reverence. Everyone knows what a rare gift a mild morning is in these walls. The cook even leaves the kitchen door open. You catch the scent of something frying, probably oatcakes, maybe bacon if the gods are kind. Your stomach growls loud enough to attract a passing chicken's curiosity. "First day of thaw," says a passing guard, smiling without irony. "Means mud. Lots of it." You nod solemnly, because in castle life, mud is destiny. You wander to the walls, where the guards are shedding their winter cloaks and standing in the sunlight like thawing statues. You join them, leaning on the cold stone and watching the distant fields beyond the moat. Patches of brown earth are appearing where snow once ruled. One of the men chuckles. "Feels like the sun's been away for a decade." You smile. Maybe it heard we ran out of firewood and took pity. Major historical fact. Medieval winters often lasted until early April, depending on the region. The thaw was both a blessing and a logistical nightmare. Roads turned to rivers, food stores spoiled, and castles smelled adventurous. You head back down, where servants are carrying baskets of damp straw outside, airing them after months of damp confinement. Someone is singing again, a lively tune about spring and ale and some misadventure involving geese. The melody sticks in your head like a polite parasite. In the great hall, a group of ladies are mending clothes near the fire. They gossip lazily, occasionally pausing to stretch their fingers. The conversation drifts toward warmer days, festivals, planting seasons, and which nights are least terrible at dancing. You sit near them, quietly stitching a tear in your cloak. One of the women glances at you and says, "You know, last year, someone put flowers in the moat to welcome spring." You raise an eyebrow. "Flowers in the moat?" She nods. "It didn't work. They just floated there like they were judging us." Obscure tidbit. Spring festivals and castles sometimes included small, symbolic gestures, sprinkling herbs, floating wreaths, or carrying candles around the grounds to wake the land. Historians still debate whether this was pagan holdover or just early-season boredom. By afternoon, the castle yard is alive with activity. People patch walls, oil hinges, clean windows, and shake out rugs that have accumulated roughly one winter's worth of dust and despair. You help carry buckets of water, careful not to slip on the thawing stones. The smell of wet earth and wood smoke fills the air. Birds start singing again, as though trying to outdo each other. You take a break on the steps leading to the garden. The sun hits your face, warm and forgiving. For a brief, luxurious moment, you almost forget what it feels like to be cold. A bee drifts past. You grin. It's the first bee of the year, and somehow that feels like a miracle. As dusk falls, you sit by the hearth once more, but this time the fire feels optional. You sip ale that tastes faintly of smoke and patience. Someone plays a flute near the corner, and the tune dances lazily through the hall. The night feels softer now, less like survival, more like promise. You curl up near the embers and think, maybe the hardest part is over. Then again, in medieval life, that thought is always tempting fate. Morning smells of damp earth and bread. That's how you know life is creeping back into the castle. The kitchen's been up since before dawn. You walk in and see dough rising under linen cloths, eggs laid in neat rows, and a small child asleep beside a basket of onions. The cook waves you in, smiling proudly. "We're baking again," she says, as if announcing the return of civilization. You help knead the dough, slow, rhythmic, oddly soothing. The flour coats your hands, warm from friction. A cat sits on the counter watching like a supervisor. When the loaves finally go into the oven, the air fills with the smell of something heavenly. You breathe deeply, half out of hunger, half out of reverence. "Best smell in the world," the cook says. You nod. "Better than incense." She laughs. "Bread is its own religion." Major historical fact: bread was the medieval diet's backbone, literally daily bread. Its quality depended on class. Nobles ate fine white loaves, manchet, while peasants often got coarse rye or barley bread filled with whatever survived the winter. You eat a piece fresh from the oven, still steaming. It's slightly burnt on the edges, but you'd call that a feature, not a flaw. Outside, the castle is fully awake now. The moat glimmers, the drawbridge creaks open, and carts begin to arrive. Farmers, traders, peddlers with their curious goods. The market hums with life. You stroll through it, eyeing baskets of onions, dried apples, small wheels of cheese, and bolts of wool dyed in uneven colors. It's not luxury, it's recovery. A man tries to sell you a carved wooden spoon. You buy it partly because it's lovely, partly because his sales pitch included the phrase, "It's good for stirring destiny." You wander to the edge of the market where an old woman is telling fortunes with stones. You kneel, half curious, half skeptical. She picks 3 small pebbles, mutters something in a language you don't recognize, and says, "You will travel, but not far." Your heart will stay where it started. You smile. That's vague enough to be true. She nods wisely. All prophecies are, dear. Obscure tidbit. Medieval people sometimes used stones or shells in folk divination rituals, believing each symbol held power. Historians still debate whether these were serious practices or just rustic entertainment for long winters. As the sun dips low, the market winds down. You help pack a few goods away, then head back to the hall, spoon in hand, bread in belly, and the faint taste of hope in your mouth. By nightfall, the castle is glowing again. Candles flickering, fires crackling, laughter echoing in the corridors. You sit near the same hearth where you've spent half the season, tracing patterns in the ash with your new spoon. Someone nearby hums a tune about spring weddings. Someone else snores quietly. The rhythm of the castle feels steady, human, alive. You glance out the window one last time. The stars shimmer faintly above the wet stone towers. The moon glows pale and full, like a soft lantern hung in the dark. You whisper to yourself, half laughing, half sighing, another night, another draft. Then you pull your cloak tighter, rest your head against the cold stone, and let the castle sing you to sleep. Because for all its chill and clamor, this place, these walls, this warmth, these people has become something like home. And home, even in winter, is never entirely cold. You wake to birdsong, not the hesitant kind you heard during the thaw, but full, jubilant chaos. Trills, chirps, whistles, all layered into a kind of medieval surround sound. For a moment, you just lie there under your wool blanket, eyes half open, listening. There's a breeze sneaking through the narrow window slit, carrying the smell of wet grass and chimney smoke. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the rhythmic clatter of hooves on stone. Spring is fully awake, and so, unfortunately, is everyone else. You stretch, creak, and yawn, discovering new muscles that had apparently gone dormant during the winter. Your feet touch the cold floor and you hiss softly, because no matter the season, stone is loyal to its chill. Down in the courtyard, it's chaos in the friendliest possible way. Servants are hauling buckets, chickens are declaring personal wars, and the blacksmith is already hammering something very loud and very unnecessary. The air hums with energy, not warmth exactly, but motion. The kind that makes people sweep things for no reason. You step out, blinking at the sunlight. There's still dampness on everything, and the castle smells like a mix of moss, iron, and fresh bread. The lady of the castle is in the garden, wearing a cloak embroidered with vines. She's pointing at the ground and giving very serious instructions to a group of workers who are clearly pretending to understand. You hear her say, "The roses must be redder than last year." Someone coughs nervously and nods. You pass by a group of children chasing each other with sticks that are almost definitely weapons. You think about telling them to stop but realize medieval children are basically feral scholars of chaos. A young monk, visiting from the nearby priory, is kneeling near the gate, sketching the castle walls in charcoal. You ask him what he's doing. "Recording God's geometry," he says without looking up. You nod sagely, pretending that made sense. Major historical fact. Monastic visitors often documented castle architecture, repairs, or donations. Sometimes they exaggerated the castle's beauty or holiness to flatter their hosts. Essentially, medieval PR work with better handwriting. You wander to the edge of the fields where peasants are turning the soil. Their movements are steady, methodical, rhythmic, like a chant made of shovels. The earth releases a deep, loamy scent that feels ancient and forgiving. A farmer waves at you, his face bright with sweat and sun. Feels good to see the ground again, eh? You nod. Almost forgot what color it was. He laughs. Brown always was, always will be. By mid-afternoon, the sky turns a hazy gold. You help carry a few buckets of water to the stable, passing the horses that look smugly clean after their first proper brushing in months. One of them sneezes dramatically, and you're certain it was on purpose. Inside, the stable smells of hay, leather, and faint sweetness. A groom is humming a tune about St. George and a very unconvincing dragon. You hum along, pretending to know the words. Obscure tidbit. Early medieval lullabies and work songs often borrowed melodies from religious hymns, but the lyrics were sometimes less holy. Historians still debate whether this blending was defiance, ignorance, or simply musical multitasking. You step outside again, and the sun's already leaning toward the horizon. The castle seems almost peaceful, smoke rising in gentle threads, children's laughter fading, a single bell tolling somewhere far away. You find yourself standing still, just breathing. It's not a grand moment, just a quiet one, but you realize that's what all this life, all this history is built on. Quiet moments that somehow survive. Night comes soft and cool. The castle glows from within like a lantern made of stone. You sit near the kitchen door, where the smell of roasted onions and bread still lingers. Someone has left a bowl of stew unattended, and you take it as a sign from the universe. Steam curls into the air. You dip your spoon, your very own spoon of destiny, you recall, and take a bite. It's salty, rich, and impossibly comforting. You've eaten fancier food in your imagination, but nothing that feels more like warmth itself. A dog ambles over, sits, and stares at you with unbroken conviction. You sigh and share a piece of bread. This is now a legally binding friendship. From the great hall you hear laughter, low, easy, unhurried. Someone's telling a story. You drift closer, bowl in hand. And then, the storyteller says, the knight realized it wasn't a dragon at all. It was his mother-in-law's goose. Laughter erupts, echoing off the stone. The firelight dances over faces, some lined with age, others pink with youth. You settle near the back, where the shadows are softer. The warmth from the fire reaches you just enough to take the edge off the chill. Major historical fact. Evenings in castles were often communal affairs. Meals, storytelling, music. While nobles feasted upstairs, servants and guards shared simpler gatherings below. The stories traded between them preserved folklore that never made it into written chronicles. Someone strums a lute. The notes are clumsy but earnest, like a heart learning to speak. You sip your ale and close your eyes, feeling the hum of the hall settle into your bones. For a moment you drift, not fully asleep, but close. The storyteller continues, his voice soft and rhythmic. In the winter, the castle dreamed of fire. In the spring, it dreamed of wings. You smile faintly. That line will stay with you. Later, when most have gone to their rooms, you wander to the parapet. The air is crisp again, but not cruel. Below you, the moat reflects the moon in shivering fragments. Somewhere in the fields, frogs are singing. It's the same sound that's echoed through every century. Soft, uncertain, but persistent. Obscure tidbit. Medieval people sometimes believed frogs sang to summon rain, and that their silence foretold drought. Historians still debate whether this belief had pagan origins or was simply poetic weather forecasting. You stand there for a while, watching the moon rise, listening to the frogs, letting the wind tug at your cloak. Then you think of everything you've seen since the first frost. The fires, the breath clouds, the cloaks heavy with ice. You think of every night you've survived by the grace of warmth and wool and sheer human stubbornness. And somehow you feel a kind of affection for it all, even the cold, especially the cold. You whisper to the night, "We made it." Then, just to be safe, you add, "Mostly." You return to your chamber, set down your spoon, and crawl under your blanket. The last sound you hear is a single drop of melted ice falling somewhere in the corridor. A small, perfect echo of everything thawing. And before you can wonder what tomorrow brings, sleep folds over you like another blanket, heavier, kinder, and far older than the castle itself. You wake to rain. Not the polite kind, the steady, whispering drizzle that politely waters gardens and cleans window panes, but a bold, confident sort of rain. The kind that's been waiting all winter to make an entrance. It beats against the shutters, rushes along the cobbles, and hums like a living creature. The castle feels alive with it, each drop echoing through the stone like the heartbeat of spring. You blink into the gray light, wrapped in your blanket like a reluctant caterpillar. Somewhere beyond your window slit, thunder rolls softly, followed by a gullible rooster crowing in defiance. You sigh. He'll regret that. The room smells faintly of damp wool and candle smoke. A puddle has formed near the wall, slowly claiming territory. You move your boots before they drown. Downstairs, the hall buzzes with motion. Servants dart between puddles, buckets in hand, trying to catch leaks that have apparently opened diplomatic relations with the ceiling. The steward gestures wildly, muttering prayers that sound suspiciously like threats. "Rain's a blessing," someone says cheerfully. "Tell that to the tapestries," the steward replies darkly. You watch a few drops land on the long table. They glisten briefly before vanishing into the grain of the wood. Centuries of meals and laughter soaked into its surface. The fire in the hearth hisses as rain sneaks down the chimney. Someone throws on another log, and sparks leap up, defiant little suns in the gloom. Major historical fact: castle roofs were notoriously prone to leaks. Even wealthy lords spent small fortunes maintaining thatched or timbered coverings, often layering moss or turf for insulation. Stone vaulting was rare and expensive. Most ceilings simply dripped. You pull your cloak tight and step outside under the overhang. The world looks washed clean. Glistening stone, mud, and the sharp green of new shoots peeking through. Beyond the walls, villagers hurry along the path, cloaks drawn up, balancing baskets and bundles under makeshift covers. You spot a woman with a child on her back, both smiling as if rain were just another old friend returning late. A group of men work at the moat, clearing debris with long poles. They joke loudly about how many frogs it would take to flood the castle. Someone nearby laughs, a sound bright enough to slice through the weather. It's one of the washerwomen, wringing out linens beneath a crude wooden awning. "If I stop washing every time it rains," she says, "I'd die of boredom before mildew." You grin. There's practicality, and then there's medieval practicality. The rain keeps falling, and slowly, the rhythm becomes hypnotic. You lean against the wall, eyes half shut, listening to centuries of patience drip from the sky. Then, as rain often does, it simply decides to stop. The world goes very still. You can hear water dripping from the eaves, trickling into the earth, seeping into everything. Then a faint, almost miraculous scent rises. Wet soil, crushed herbs, a trace of smoke. You take a deep breath and let it fill you. Obscure tidbit: some medieval herbalists believe that rain collected during the first storm of spring held the sleeping breath of angels, and used it in healing salves. Historians still debate whether this was symbolic medicine or simply poetic marketing. You smile at the thought, imagining a monk bottling angel breath with serious devotion. By evening, the castle is wrapped in fog. The torches burn dimly, halos of light floating in the mist. Inside, everything glows, low firelight, golden puddles on the floor, and the quiet rustle of damp wool drying near the hearth. You sit by the window, tracing raindrops on the glass, and think about how water has touched everything you've known. The stone, the fields, even your breath. And for a fleeting, sleepy moment, you realize the castle doesn't resist the weather. It sings with it. The next morning smells of bread and clean air. You wake before the bell, a rare accomplishment in any century, and the world feels gentler, quieter. The rain has rinsed everything into softness. Even the sky looks half asleep, tinted with the faintest blush of gold. You wander down to the courtyard where puddles mirror the towers and clouds. A few ducks have arrived from nowhere, conducting secret aquatic business. You give them a solemn nod. They ignore you. A cook's boy passes carrying a basket of eggs, and you hear him mutter, "One cracked, 3 missing, and I swear the goose is possessed." You decide not to investigate. At the well, 2 maids draw water, chatting about dreams. One involving a knight, the other a goat. You don't ask for details. Some mysteries are better left medieval. Major historical fact: water from castle wells was often used sparingly for drinking or cooking. Most washing, bathing, and brewing relied on rainwater collection or nearby streams. Wells were deep and guarded. Losing one could mean siege-level disaster. You peer into the well and see your reflection shimmer among the ripples. Ghostly, soft-edged, like someone who belongs halfway between this time and another. A bell rings, not the harsh clang of warning, but a gentle call to breakfast. In the great hall, the air hums with quiet domestic joy. Bread crusts cracking, butter spreading, spoons clinking. A cat stalks under the table like a furry tax collector. You sit, sip a mug of warm ale and listen. Someone is telling a story about a saint who once turned a thief into a tree. You can't tell if it's meant as inspiration or a threat. Outside, a faint mist hangs over the meadow, glowing in the pale sun. You take your bread and step into it. The grass glitters with dew. Every blade looks painted. Birds hop through the puddles, shaking droplets like tiny bells. You walk slowly, carefully, as though you might disturb the balance of something sacred. A shepherd passes with his flock, greeting you with a wave and a toothless grin. His dog trots alongside, eyes sharp, herding the sheep with expert subtlety. He pauses to adjust his cloak, a heavy, woolen thing that could double as a tent. "Cold night still," he says almost cheerfully, "but the sheep don't mind. They're wiser than we are." You laugh. "They don't have taxes." He chuckles back. "That helps too." Obscure tidbit. Medieval shepherds often named every single sheep, treating them as individuals, not out of sentimentality, but practicality. Knowing who wandered, who birthed twins, who wandered again was part of daily survival. Historians still debate whether this habit was more spiritual or simply bookkeeping with bleeding. As you walk, the mist thins, revealing the far hills. You spot small cottages, smoke curling lazily from their roofs. Somewhere, a bell rings again, fainter this time, from a chapel you can't see. You pause. Everything is quiet except for the distant murmur of the river. The air smells faintly of honey and wet wood. For once, the castle feels less like a fortress and more like a heartbeat, pulsing gently in rhythm with the land. You think back to your first night, huddled under coarse wool, convinced the cold would never end. And now here you are, barefoot in dew, tasting spring. The day stretches open like a slow yawn. You smile, watching sunlight spill through the mist, warming your face. Somewhere behind you, the bell rings again. Not to wake you this time, but to remind you, you're already awake. And for now, that's enough. The sun rises just a little earlier each day now, as if even the sky has started to thaw. You wake with a quiet stretch, listening to the soft creak of the timber above you. No dripping, no wind howling, no mysterious. Was that a ghost or just the castle settling? Noises. Just warmth slowly creeping in. You roll from bed like a loaf of bread easing out of a warm oven. Not pretty, but satisfying. Down in the corridor, the torches have burned down to thick stubs. Their glow is faint, but cheerful, like candles too tired to be dramatic anymore. You step into the courtyard and feel it instantly. The change. The crisp bite of winter has turned into a cool nibble of early spring. Light, fresh, and much less offended by the existence of human skin. A young stable hand is sweeping leaves, humming the same 4 notes over and over. You wonder if he knows more. You hope he does. For his sake. The horses stamp softly, warm breath curling like smoke dragons from their nostrils. One nudges your sleeve hopefully, because horses, like cats, always assume you're carrying snacks. You are not. The horse is disappointed. You apologize. A night passes by, armor clinking gently, smelling faintly of metal and morning dew. He yawns loudly, visor still down. You nod politely. He does not see you. Visors are like that. Inside the hall, breakfast is livelier today. People sit a little straighter, voices rise a little louder. Someone is even laughing. Not the polite, please don't notice I'm cold and starving laugh from winter, but the legitimate life is tolerable again kind. Major historical fact. Medieval diets improved significantly in spring. Fresh greens like sorrel, chives, and leeks appeared first, signaling relief from salted winter rations. Spring fever wasn't just romance, it was the human body remembering vitamins exist. At the table, a bowl of fresh herbs is passed around as though it's treasure. You nibble one leaf and suddenly understand how rabbits feel when they find the good lettuce. A woman across the table smiles knowingly. Tastes like hope, she says. You agree. After breakfast, you wander the outer bailey. Men are repairing the palisades while chickens supervise, clucking judgmentally. Children chase each other between barrels, shrieking with the type of joy only possible when toes are not at risk of frostbite. A carpenter is carving new shingles for the roof. The rain taught everyone a soggy lesson yesterday. He pauses to wipe his brow. Roof's like a marriage, he tells you. You gotta patch leaks before the flood. You are not sure whether to laugh or send condolences. Obscure tidbit. Archaeologists found that medieval sleeping linens were sometimes scented with herbs like lavender, sweet woodruff, or meadowsweet. Not for romance, but to repel bugs. Historians still debate whether this worked well or if the bugs simply became minty fresh roommates. The Lord strolls by, cloak billowing a little too dramatically for this casual morning. A falcon perches on his glove, staring at you with aristocratic suspicion. The Lord says, "A fine day." The falcon says nothing but judges everything. You bow slightly, mostly to the bird. By midday, the sky has softened into a pale blue bowl, dotted with lazy clouds. You find a quiet corner near the garden, sit on a stone bench warmed by sun, and finally, relax without shivering. For a few minutes, nothing needs defending. Not the walls, not the food stores, not your bed from the drafts. You breathe out tension that's been there since your first night. A bee bumbles past. You take that as a good omen. When evening comes, the castle glows. Not from fire alone, but from this new, delicate promise in the air. You go to sleep without clutching the blanket like a shield. And for the first time, your dreams smell like spring. You wake with sunlight on your face. A luxury so extravagant you momentarily assume you are royalty. Then you remember you are you. Still, sunlight is sunlight, and you accept this royal blessing with a yawn. The castle is buzzing with an unusual sort of excitement today. The steward announces preparations for a visiting noble, meaning everyone must suddenly pretend they live in a perfectly functional building with no leaks, mud, or poultry rebellions. Women scrub the floors until the stones gleam. Men polish armor until they can see their tired expressions reflected back at them. And someone, probably a scribe, is trying to teach a goose to behave. It goes poorly. A seamstress rushes past holding a dress dyed a fresh leafy green, rare and costly. It sways like a captured meadow in her arms. She mutters under her breath, "If he spills wine on this, I will declare a personal war." You decide not to stand in her way. Major historical fact. Visiting nobles meant feasts, and feasts meant warmth, light, and comfort. Even lower ranks benefited from leftovers. Hospitality was political currency. Castles became temporary luxury hotels with questionable plumbing. You are assigned a task that seems simple enough. Prepare sleeping pallets in the guest chamber. Extra straw, extra blankets, extra everything that suggests warmth and wealth. You fluff hay like a dedicated cloud sculptor. You smooth wool blankets like a professional winter therapist. Each bed looks ridiculously comfortable compared to your nightly blanket wrestling matches. You pause and consider switching name tags to reserve one for yourself. You do not, but you consider it. Obscure tidbit. Some nobles traveled with personal featherbeds, the medieval equivalent of bringing your own luxury mattress on trips. Historians still debate whether this was for comfort or to avoid suspicious castle lice. You look at your hay pile again. Suddenly, you would also like a portable featherbed. The afternoon fills with preparations. Musicians rehearse in the corner. One plays beautifully, one squeaks like a desperate duck, and the third is definitely new at this. In the kitchen, pots clatter, herbs are crushed, and flour dust floats like edible snow. You sneak a small taste of cheese stew and discover heaven is creamy. The cook glares, but since you already swallowed, he can only sigh. As torches are lit for evening, warm light pools in every corner. The castle feels less like stone and more like a giant hearth, glowing from the inside. The noble arrives with a flourish, cloak trimmed with fur, boots spotless, eyes immediately scanning for imperfections. He nods once. Satisfaction achieved, and the entire castle seems to breathe again. The feast begins. Roasted meat, warm bread, spiced wine. Cheese so melty you consider proposing marriage. You laugh, you eat, you bask in warmth like a lizard discovering the sun. Even your toes are happy, a scientific miracle. Musicians play a gentle tune. Not too fast, not too loud, just right for a sleepy castle at peace. A jester performs a trick involving 3 apples and a near concussion. Everyone applauds. Even the falcon seems entertained. Maybe. Later, as the fire dims and guests drift toward their luxurious hay piles, you linger near the hearth, letting the final warmth sink in. Your eyelids grow heavy. Your thoughts grow soft. Your blanket feels like a cloud training to be a hug. You slip into bed, your own, not the fancy guest ones, and melt into the wool. For the first time since winter began, you fall asleep smiling. You dream of the castle long before it ever existed. No stones yet, no moat, no drawbridge. Just a rise of earth and a few tents clinging to the morning fog. Men are shouting, women are cooking, and the wind smells of damp grass and smoked meat. Someone points to the hill and says, "Here, this is where we'll make it last." You blink, and suddenly you're standing in the same spot centuries later, but now surrounded by thick walls, arched gates, and banners flapping lazily in the sun. The dream folds time like parchment. Each layer shows another version of the same place. A castle born, rebuilt, repaired, mourned, lived in, laughed through. The past hums softly, like bees behind the walls. You wake with that hum still in your ears. The room is tinted with dawn light, pale gold and shy. Outside, someone is singing a harvest song months too early. A tune that never quite left the air after the feast. You stretch and your joints pop like faint drumbeats. Down the corridor, the rushes have been changed. Fresh herbs fill the air, lavender, sage, mint. You inhale and instantly feel 17% more civilized. You wander to the courtyard again. Dew clings to every blade of grass like tiny mirrors. The air is full of quiet chores, the steady rhythm of daily life. A maid is wringing laundry, humming to herself. A guard adjusts his belt, not because it's loose, but because adjusting things looks important. The blacksmith's apprentice yawns so deeply you can hear his soul sigh. A cat, always the same gray one, weaves between feet with royal entitlement. It looks up at you as if to say, "You again. Still here. Yes, still here." And for once, that feels right. You help gather firewood, though your definition of help mostly involves carrying 2 sticks and moral support. An old man nearby tells you about the castle's founding, the first lord, the first wall, the first flood, the second wall. He laughs and says, "The trick to keeping a place like this standing isn't the stone. It's the people who keep patching the holes." You nod, though you suspect he's talking about more than walls. Historical tidbit. Medieval castles weren't static monuments. They evolved constantly. Walls were rebuilt, towers added, kitchens expanded, moats dug and redug. What we think of as one castle was usually the living result of hundreds of adjustments, generations of trial, error, and weather damage. Like people, really. You fix what breaks, you endure what doesn't, and you call it home. By midday, the warmth is generous but soft. A perfect afternoon for not accomplishing much. You find a sunlit corner of the bailey wall, sit, and lean back against the stone. The surface is cool at first, but then the warmth of the day seeps through. You close your eyes, listening to the distant rhythm of hammers, footsteps, laughter. The castle breathes, and so do you. Evening brings a gentle restlessness. The air hums with the faint possibility of rain, though no one seems worried. You step onto the outer wall and watch as the landscape softens under twilight. Fields fading from gold to gray, woods melting into silhouettes. Someone nearby is whittling a piece of wood, the shavings catching the last of the light like curled ribbons. He doesn't look up when he says, "Funny thing how people think castles are quiet. They're never quiet. They just speak slower." You smile. That feels true. The chapel bell tolls once, low and kind. People drift toward evening prayers, their voices murmuring through stone corridors, softened by centuries of repetition. You pause at the threshold but don't go in. You simply listen to words shaped by time, worn smooth by use, steady as breathing. Faith here isn't dramatic. It's domestic. Smells like wax, wood smoke, and patience. Outside, The rain finally begins. A slow, thoughtful drizzle that turns torches into gentle sparks. You wrap your cloak tighter and walk along the wall walk, watching the droplets trace little rivers across the stone. Down in the courtyard, a few soldiers dash for cover, laughing like boys. Someone curses at a leaking roof. The cook's fire hisses but holds. The world smells of wet earth and bread. You find the old mason again, sitting beneath an overhang, sharpening his tools even though no one will build tonight. He looks up and says, "Stone's like people. You can't rush the shaping. You wait until it's ready." You ask him how he knows when that is. He shrugs. When it stops fighting you. The rain lightens, leaving the air washed and sweet. Frogs croak somewhere beyond the moat, the kind of sound that makes you nostalgic for something you never lived. You stand there long after the castle quiets, long after the torches sputter out. And in the darkness, with water dripping from the eaves, you realize the strange truth of it all. You've become part of this place. Not a visitor, not a guest, just another quiet heartbeat in the long story of stone and sleep. You head back to your chamber. The air inside is warm from the banked hearth. You slip under the wool blanket, the scent of herbs still faint on the sheets. Rain patters on the shutters, a lullaby older than walls. Your eyes close before you mean them to, and the last thing you feel is the castle settling around you. Content, alive, still whispering in its sleep. Morning again, though it feels different now. The air outside is lighter, emptied of storm. Mist hangs low over the fields, the kind that makes everything seem both near and far, the kind that turns the castle into a floating island of memory. You rise slowly, not out of reluctance, but because it feels wrong to hurry. Your movements echo faintly in the quiet chamber, the sound of feet meeting stone, of cloth rustling against wool. There's a strange stillness in the corridors. Even the servants walk slower today, as though time itself has decided to nap in. You pass through the great hall one more time. The ashes in the central hearth are gray and fine, still faintly warm. Someone has left a wooden cup by the ashes, half full of ale, as if in offering to the night that kept them alive. You smile at that small human superstition. Maybe warmth needs gratitude to stay. A cat hops onto the table, stretches, then settles exactly where the Lord once sat. No one moves it. The cat is undeniably in charge now. You make your way to the courtyard. The rain has polished everything. Cobblestones gleam, moss looks greener. The moat mirrors the sky. A few guards are mending a fence, humming to keep rhythm. Someone's child is chasing a chicken, laughing like sunlight on water. You think, if eternity were made of little things like this, laughter, chores, rain, it would be enough. You walk to the wall again where you first looked out days ago. Only now the view feels quieter, less foreign. Below, the land breathes steam, thin trails of morning fog sliding over plowed earth. Beyond that, a forest you'll never walk. Beyond that, the unknown world that used to terrify people who lived right here. One of the guards joins you, his cloak damp but cheerful. "Leaving soon?" he asks. You nod. He sighs. "You'll miss the stew tonight. Best part of castle life, if you ask me. The stew and the gossip." You laugh softly, promising to come back someday, though both of you know that's unlikely. Historical fact. Medieval travelers often returned to castles and monasteries that had once sheltered them, sometimes years later, and found them utterly changed, rebuilt, burned, or abandoned. The pace of decay was fast. Permanence was mostly an illusion. And yet, what lasted wasn't the walls, but the memory of the warmth inside them. You take one last slow walk through the gatehouse. The portcullis is up. The world beyond yawns wide and bright. Your boots make that hollow echo one last time, and then grass. Soft, springy, alive. Behind you, the castle looms, not as fortress or prison, but as something almost gentle. You raise a hand in farewell. For a moment, you swear you see a figure at the window, or maybe just the reflection of clouds. Historians still debate whether ghosts exist. You decide it doesn't matter. As you walk down the hill, the wind picks up, tugging at your cloak. The sun slides through the mist, spilling gold like honey, and you realize you're warm. Not from the fire, not from fur, but from memory, that secret kind of warmth that stays even when everything else fades. You stop by the stream below the castle, the same one that carried cold water up through pipes and buckets and prayers. It gurgles happily, oblivious to time, as though the last 1,000 years were just one long afternoon. You kneel and dip your hands into it. It's shockingly cold, a reminder of what people once lived with, endured, joked about. You splash your face, and the chill wakes something gentle inside you. A gratitude, perhaps, for every warm hearth you've ever sat beside, and every wall that kept wind out just long enough for sleep to happen. A heron takes flight nearby, long legs, slow wings. It circles once, then glides toward the horizon where the sun is rising fully now. You follow its path with your eyes, until the castle behind you is just a shadow against the light. The world feels huge again, but softer than before, as if living through someone else's cold nights has somehow made the air kinder. Historical tidbit. The great irony of medieval cold was that it bound people together. Families, servants, even animals shared heat, sometimes literally in the same room. Affection wasn't poetic. It was survival. Warmth meant company. Loneliness meant frostbite. You think of that as you walk. How strange it is that comfort and companionship were once the same thing, and maybe still are. The road bends, revealing fields, cottages, a small market town in the distance. Smoke rises from chimneys. Somewhere bread is baking. You pull your cloak closer, not because you're cold, but because it feels right to. The wool smells faintly of smoke and lavender, a scent that now feels like home. You find a quiet hill overlooking it all. From here, the castle is a shape of memory, tall, weathered, and still somehow alive. You sit in the grass, watching as morning turns to day. The world moves on as it always has, and for the first time you feel ready to let it. You close your eyes. The sound of the wind through the grass mimics the rustle of straw mattresses, the hiss of fire, the rhythm of rain on shutters. Everything you heard, saw, touched, still here, folded inside the quiet. You exhale. The castle exhales with you, and for a moment you both rest. Two old souls in the same long story, finally warm. The road dips through the valley, the grass shimmering with dew. Birdsong curls through the air, hesitant at first, then full, as though the entire landscape is stretching after a long sleep. You walk slowly, feeling the weight of the castle's rhythm still inside you. The slow turning of hours, the patience of stone. You pass shepherds leading their flocks, their cloaks patched with the same care as the tapestries you once admired by the fire. They nod to you with a kind of quiet knowing, the look of people who have lived in every weather and still smiled through it. You pause beside an old stone bridge, its surface slick with moss. Water whispers underneath, the same water, perhaps, that once froze midstream during the worst winters of the 14th century. Historical fact. During the Great Frost of 1315, rivers in England and France froze solid, stopping mills and trade. Some castles had to melt their own moat ice for water, turning defense into drinking supply. You imagine that, soldiers breaking ice in silence, their breath white as smoke. And you think, it's strange how survival over time becomes nostalgia. There's a scent of damp earth, of rain-soaked hay, of distance. The day grows warmer, but you don't hurry. The road dips through the valley, the grass shimmering with dew. Birdsong curls through the air, hesitant at first, then full, as though the entire landscape is stretching after a long sleep. You walk slowly, feeling the weight of the castle's rhythm still inside you. The slow turning of hours, the patience of stone. You pass shepherds leading their flocks, their cloaks patched with the same care as the tapestries you once admired by the fire. They nod to you with a kind of quiet knowing, the look of people who have lived in every weather and still smiled through it. You pause beside an old stone bridge, its surface slick with moss. Water whispers underneath, the same water, perhaps, that once froze midstream during the worst winters of the 14th century. Historical fact: during the Great Frost of 1315, rivers in England and France froze solid, stopping mills and trade. Some castles had to melt their own moat ice for water, turning defense into drinking supply. You imagine that, soldiers breaking ice in silence, their breath white as smoke. And you think, it's strange how survival over time becomes nostalgia. There's a scent of damp earth, of rain-soaked hay, of distance. The day grows warmer, but you don't hurry. Every sound feels exaggerated. A cart will squeak, a crow's call, your own breathing. It's as though the world has slowed its heartbeat to match yours. You spot a cottage on the horizon, smoke rising lazily from its roof. It looks humble, safe, like the last inn before dream. Inside, the fire is already burning. A woman sits by it, stirring a pot of something that smells faintly of barley and herbs. Her cat curls at her feet, tail flicking to the rhythm of her spoon. She glances up at you and nods toward the fire, wordlessly inviting you closer. You take a seat on the worn wooden bench, the warmth licking gently at your hands. It feels like an ending, but also like something older than endings, the moment before a story folds into memory. The woman hums softly. It's not a song you recognize, though something about it feels inevitable. The way twilight always returns, the way warmth always seeks you out. You sip from the bowl she offers, warm broth, humble, perfect. You thank her, and she only smiles, as if she's heard that same gratitude 1,000 times from travelers long gone. You can't tell if she's real or something the story has dreamed for you. Historians still debate whether certain medieval travelers' visions were faith or exhaustion. You decide she's both. The fire crackles. The air thickens with comfort. And before you know it, your eyes start to close. You wake, or maybe you never did sleep. It doesn't matter. The castle, the road, the woman, the cat, all are fading into a kind of golden quiet. Outside, the sun is low again, smudging the sky with that soft, burnt orange light that feels older than language. The air tastes like wood smoke and wheat. You stretch slowly, the kind of stretch that means you've arrived not at a destination but at peace with the journey itself. You walk back toward the window. Beyond it, the valley hums gently. Fields, windmills, faint laughter somewhere in the distance. You imagine the castle high above, walls glowing faintly in dusk, the fires inside beginning their ancient ritual once more. Someone is piling logs, someone is mending a blanket, someone is whispering prayers into the soft dark. Life continues, one slow breath at a time. You think of everything you've seen, the sleeping nobles wrapped in fur, the servants huddled by embers, the cats that ruled the kitchens, the wind that howled through cracks but never quite won. All of it so fragile, so stubborn, so human. Now the scene grows softer. The outlines of the world melt into one another, stone to mist, fire to memory. The voice that has been guiding you, your own, perhaps, quiets. You feel a weightless calm in your chest. The same kind you get just before sleep takes you, gentle and complete. If you listen closely, you might still hear the faint sound of crackling wood, the rhythm of dripping rain from a castle gutter, the sigh of wind curling through a half-open window. They're not calling you back, they're tucking you in. The world of cold walls and warm fires has done its job. Kept you awake just long enough to remember how good it feels to rest. So breathe out. Let the warmth spread from your chest to your hands, to your face, to the space around you. You've wandered through centuries, crossed stone bridges and snowdrifts, met ghosts and cats and kind strangers. You've survived the cold nights of medieval life and somehow you're still warm. Outside, the stars begin to appear, patient, glittering, impossibly far away. But for now, you're closer to the small flame that still glows inside you, steady and ancient. You close your eyes. The castle fades. The story exhales. And sleep, slow, soft, certain, finds you.